The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Tuesday, September 25th, Wednesday, September 26th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. Hope you had a great day and night. I am your host, Dave Scott, broadcasting to you live from the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia, right here at SOR headquarters. We're 150,000 strong nightly on the SOR radio network and Deep Talk Radio, and we welcome each and every one of you to tonight's show. You want to take a listen to our archives, they are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to the birthday boy Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, just a couple of days away from the first annual Caribou Paracon, presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. You can go to questers.ca, click on the fall conference, get your tickets. I want to see all of you up here. Come for a great weekend in the Caribou. Tonight's show is brought to you by the YouTube channel Ensuho. Sebastian Martin brings high-quality messages to the masses. Go to spacedoutradio.com, click on the Ensuho banner, and subscribe to the channel today. First off, before we get started, there's someone special to Spaced Out Radio having a birthday tonight. Our resident guitar god, Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal of Sons of Apollo, formerly of Guns N' Roses, takes care of all of our music, and he's celebrating his last year in the 40s. We wish Mr. Thal a happy birthday from all of us at Spaced Out Radio, and as listeners, if you could all do me a favor, go on his Twitter, @Bumblefoot, or on his Facebook Bumblefoot page, wish him a happy birthday. He does a lot for this show, so it'd mean a lot to me if you, the audience, would share some of that love as well. Happy birthday, Mr. B. Tonight, how do you go from stand-up comedy to talking about the paranormal? Is there a link between the two that I don't know about? Well, we're going to find out tonight as David Race comes in to join us from Hollywood to discuss this exact topic. David has appeared on The Howard Stern Show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, SiriusXM's Radio Raw Dog Comedy Channel, and so many more appearances. He was the creator and the popular host of an online show called Celebrity Eulogy and the hit podcast Comedians Talking About Bigfoot. He is now the creator of a new podcast called Monstrosity with David Race. Sounds very interesting, doesn't it? I say you go check it out, monstrositypodcast.com. It's interesting. What leads a comedian to have interest in Bigfoot? We're going to find out. Then in the bottom of hour number 3, Everett Themer will be with us with The Encounter, our latest edition of the SOR News. Mr. David Race, thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. How's it going down in California?
It's going well. Very good to be here.
Very glad to have you here, my friend, and we're going to get into a lot of paranormal topics tonight. We're going to run with absolutely everything, but I want my audience to learn about you a little bit because, I mean, you started in radio, you switched over to comedy, and now you're doing this podcast that is out of the ordinary, my friend.
Yeah, it is. How did I get into this is the obvious question, and the answer is that I guess maybe 2014 or so, right before I started Comedians Talking About Bigfoot, every comic in LA, at that point was starting to do a podcast. And all I'm hearing about in all the comedy clubs is, hey, you doing a podcast? I'm doing a podcast. Boy, this guy's podcast is good. Are you doing his podcast tomorrow? People just talking about their podcast. And I knew I had a radio background, and at the time I was a little, snooty about podcasts. I kind of looked at podcasts like, podcasts? I'd already been a disc jockey for years in New York and Philadelphia. What's this podcast stuff? It seemed like something silly to do. And then I guess one day I was just kind of ruminating on that at home, and I found myself thinking, I could do a podcast about my intense interest in Bigfoot. Because I'll come back to this, but by that time, I already, by 2014, 2015, I already had years of interest in the whole Bigfoot topic and had been studying it like a madman. I mean, reading probably dozens and dozens and dozens of books on it and watching every possible show you can watch on these topics for years. So I was like, up, down, in and out, knowledgeable on that topic and really, really interested in it. I was the kind of guy that was sitting on the beach in Cancun, with books about Bigfoot. When the guy next to you is reading normal looking things, and I'm the guy with a book cover that has Bigfoot on it at a resort hotel. And I thought, let me do a podcast that discusses Bigfoot with comedians in the reverential way that I would discuss it. I mean, I'm serious about it and believe in it and have my own experiences, so I wanted to discuss them in the reverential way I would. But I knew if I put comedian friends of mine in the room with it, they'll inevitably have funny things to say, and it'll bring out the funnier side of my take on things. So I knew it'll sort of like yin and yang between funny and my passion and knowledge. And I also knew that my passion and knowledge itself was funny. I knew that just the fact that I was passionate and knowledgeable about it would sound funny. So I started this Comedians Talking About Bigfoot podcast in 2014-15. And right away, it was pretty magical. It was exactly what I envisioned it to be. Exactly the things I kind of described it as just now. Came clear right away in the first episode or two. And I'd say by the middle of the run, I only did 7 episodes. It was 7 over 7 months. So in the middle of the run, probably by episode 4 or 5, it was already TV interest. And by the time we finished episode 7, actually I originally intended to do just 6. I was going to do a straight 6-month run, but I ended up doing a 7th episode because Bobo from Finding Bigfoot contacted me about being on, and I thought he was special enough to actually do another episode, so that's how we got to 7. No one's ever heard me say that before. But we did 7 episodes, and by the time the 7th was done, I was definitely, into full-blown TV meetings and things, and discussing, what thing we can do with television for it. And we ended up signing a development deal to do a TV project based on it. And the TV project was more or less a reality show. I mean, it was more or less a traveling around, out in the field kind of reality show, where I threw a couple comics I know on the show together with me, and we went out and shot a whole week pilot. The concept was good on paper, and I had some really funny things written for it, but it just didn't come out the way I think I fully intended. It came out more documentary style than I would have wanted. I don't know who to blame. I'll just leave out blaming anybody. I'll just say that, maybe I didn't come to the table with as much written, prepared, like, let's do this, let's make sure we capture that on film. Here's a funny sight gag that I want to make sure happens. Maybe I didn't, think it through and make sure it was as on paper as it should have been. Maybe the production company, documentary the hell out of it and, kind of declawed the comedy. Some kind of a combination like that is probably how we got there. But we ended up with, a pilot that was not really the full vision of what I think it could have been. And so we never really took it to market fully. So it never ended up, we took it some places, but it did not have the wide attempt to sell it that probably it could have had, because it just wasn't what it really should have been. And then after a little while, a year or so, licking my wounds, I sat and conceived of this new podcast, Monstrosity, which is very, very similar to the old one. The old one, the biggest difference really being that the old one was comedians talking about Bigfoot, and I kept it only at Bigfoot, and we never, ever deviated to any of the other paranormal topics. Just every episode was a Bigfoot expert on the phone, a couple comedians in the room, me at the center of it, and the discussion was about Bigfoot. And Monstrosity is more or less going in any of the paranormal directions. We can be talking to a ghost expert, a UFO expert, a Bigfoot expert, a Loch Ness Monster expert. The guests are not necessarily only comedians. It tends to lean that way, mostly because I know comedians. But the guests, theoretically can be and will be and are, actresses, actors, others of notoriety, along with comedians. It doesn't have to be 2 comedians and me. It could be a comedian and a TV news guy. It could be a comedian and a well-known rock star, that sort of thing. And then on the phone, of course, the paranormal guest. And I also try to make sure on Monstrosity that we change subjects at some point in the episode. I try to do it as often as I can in the episode. So, for example, if the telephone guest is a Bigfoot expert, and I know we're going to be talking Bigfoot for a half hour, maybe I happen to find out in a pre-interview that one of my in-studio guests had a UFO sighting. So if I know that from a pre-interview, my assistant might have found that out in a pre-interview. If we know that, then I'll probably bring up to that, guest at some point during the show, tell me about your UFO sighting, so that we cover UFOs also.
Right. I do got to ask, how do you go from comedy to Bigfoot, though? What was your interest in Bigfoot that really made you say, I got to do something about this?
Well, the original interest goes back to childhood. I mean, without giving away my age too badly, because that's really dangerous in L.A., I can tell you that I remember, and you're in Canada, so I don't know, was this even in Canada? Maybe it was. But I remember in the mid-late 70s, there was a little period of time where they started releasing in American movie theaters, like weird kind of creepy documentaries. And there was a Bigfoot one. I don't even remember what it was called. But there was some kind of like a, in search of, like the Leonard Nimoy, in search of like something in that flavor, but Bigfoot thing in movie theaters. And I remember as a kid being fascinated. It was mostly the Patterson-Gimlin film that I remember being the center thing you would see in the commercials and stuff for it. And I think as a kid I saw that, and that scared the wits out of me. And then later on, after school, I'd watch the reruns of In Search Of. I do vaguely remember Nimoy's In Search Of in its original run in the late 70s. I kind of remember that from when I was a little kid, but my better, clearer memory of the Nimoy show was later on when I was like a teenager. That would run a lot late in the afternoon, like 4:30 in the afternoon. Something with some maybe A&E or some cable channel was showing all the old In Search of. So I used to watch that late in the afternoon, before dinner and stuff, and I got really into all those topics, and I thought that particular show was really great, scary, creepy show. I mean, it wasn't just that the topics were great. I mean, your audience knows those topics. I know those topics, so do you, and we all love those topics. It was how they did them. There were little things they did in that particular In Search of that they don't do in the current one, the new one. Mainly things like the type of background music, the type of music beds that were playing underneath his voiceover. If you notice, I was watching last night. I was watching the most recent episode of the Zachary Quinto In Search of, and towards the end of it was the Atlantis episode, and towards the end of the Atlantis episode, at the very end, actually, he just kind of recaps how he's feeling about this whole Atlantis thing, having investigated it for the last 2 hours, and he's talking to whoever's asking him the questions off camera. He's speaking about how he feels, but he's not speaking straight to camera. He's clearly, been set up with what the question is. So how do you feel about this Atlantis stuff? And he's just talking about it, kind of a little bit cheating, crooked to camera. That's not how Nimoy show was done. Nimoy show was done straight to he'd have walked straight to camera in a dramatic way, and he would have held you in an emotional position of fear and interest, and the music would have creeped you out, and they did everything differently on the old In Search of. They did it right. So that show really caught me. And then later on, much later on, in the I think it was 2007, October of 2007, I was upstate New York at a vacation home that my family owned. My father, had this house in our family for 10 zillion years since I was a little kid. And I was there in 2007 with my wife and my father and his wife. And he had told me over the years different things that happened at this property that I later on, as I got more and more reading Bigfoot stuff, I realized that they're Bigfoot sounding incidents. I didn't, over the years, when I was, say, 23 years old and he was telling me these things, I didn't at all connect it to Bigfoot. But later on, when I started reading Bigfoot stuff and learning about Bigfoot behavior, my father and his stories, the things that had happened on that property, started sounding like Bigfoot incidents to me, and I realized now that they were. Like, he would find a deer in a trail on the property. The property is 55 acres large, in a deep in the woods, high up on a mountain, like no neighbors anywhere around. And he'd just find a deer with like a broken back leg and like it's a chunk taken out of its body and a broken neck, just laying there, which is a very weird assassination of a deer in the middle of the woods in upstate New York. And, when he would tell me that, say, at 23, 24 years old, I didn't think anything of it other than that's weird. But later on, when I started reading Bigfoot stuff and learning how Bigfoots kill and what way they would potentially kill a deer, it started being obvious to me that was a Bigfoot that did that. And then as I read and learned about the topic, I discovered that there was this thing called the Whitehall Monster in upstate New York. And the Whitehall Monster had been notorious for a gazillion years, and there have been a lot of Bigfoot sightings in Whitehall. Well, guess what? Whitehall is in the same county where my father's house is. It's about 40 minutes away from that house.
Interesting.
And, those are things I learned later. And late in the 2000s, I put all those dots together. But back to the 2007 story, which I talk about the 2007 incident in detail on the first episode of my old podcast. I definitely talk about this, but probably not as much detail as I can go into now because I have a little more time. But the 2007 incident, my wife and I, the whole night weird things were happening. She was standing at one point earlier in the evening, maybe 10 o'clock, on a balcony of the house that was just looking out the woods and the clear skies up there, and She was looking through a telescope that was out on the balcony at the stars and stuff. And I remember just kind of watching her through the glass in the living room, like watching through the glass from the living room out to the balcony that she's standing out there. And she's just seeming skittish. I'm noticing that she's kind of looking left and right and kind of acting jumpy. And eventually she comes in and says to me, it's weird out here. I got to come in the house. And she's not like that. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, I feel like something's watching me. I feel like there's something here watching me. Now, the woods and the tree line would only be, a couple hundred feet tops from this balcony. I mean, she's kind of surrounded by tree line that enters into dark forest in every direction from that balcony at a couple hundred feet. And she said that, and then later on in the night, we're sound asleep in one of the guest bedrooms. This is a log cabin, like a heavy treated wood log cabin deep in the woods. Again, remember, no neighbors anywhere. I mean, the nearest neighbor is a mile away and 3,000 or 2,000 feet down. He's down on the ground. Like, we're at the top of a mountain, deep in the woods, 55 acres in. And 3 o'clock in the morning, while we're in the pitch dark, sound asleep, something banged on the wall in the room we were sleeping on. I mean, boom! I'm talking about the force of the hit. If this, for argument's sake, had been you, Dave Scott, your arm would have turned into baby powder on the spot. It would have. No human being could have ever hit this wall this hard without having an absolutely shattered to dust, appendage. And the hit also, I would say, was 10, 11 feet up, because it was over our heads, kind of next to the window, and we're a little bit risen in this bedroom anyway. We're already like onto the second level, which is not that high, but onto the second level of this house. So I would say that the hit was probably 11 feet high, and again, deep in the woods. So we jump up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, from this bang, boom, right next to our heads, next to this window. And someone would say to me, well, why didn't you open the window? Did you look? It was right there. You're next to the window. We didn't. I can't even tell you why we didn't. I don't know if it's because it was so startling to be woken out of an absolute dead sleep in the pitch dark at 3 in the morning, and you just instinctively just kind of go, what? Oh, good night. All right. And you go and you fall, your head falls back down. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was God protecting me from what I was going to see if I had, turned the Venetian blinds down and looked out the window, because I can tell you now that I believe that I would have been staring face to face with a Bigfoot literally inches from me, and I'd probably still be unconscious in that room right now. Whatever it is, some reason, one or the other of us did not peek out this window that was right next to my head, where this thing had just banged on the wall. And I actually am glad that I didn't look, because I really, there's no one more fearful than me of things. So I am not the guy you want to have an encounter like. No, I'm telling you that my scream would have scared the Bigfoot. But I didn't look. She didn't look. Our heads hit the pillow again. We're back asleep. A minute later, 2 minutes later, and it wasn't until the next day I said to my father, did anything weird happen last night? We had this gigantic bang on the wall in the middle of the night. And he goes, what do you mean? And I told him the story I just told you, and he said, well, it's probably a deer or something like that, which makes no sense.
It's always a deer. It's always a deer.
Yeah, it's always a deer just ran head first straight into this wall? And why isn't he laying with all 4 legs up unconscious right now next to this house? I mean, there's nothing that could have hit this wall this hard that wouldn't be dead next to that wall right now. Not to mention at 11 feet high, he would have hit it. And then, of course, I think I said something maybe half close to that to him. And he said, we also have bears here sometimes. It could be a bear. Which, I'm not even sure that's necessarily true. They could have black bears upstate New York there occasionally. That would be possible. But what black bear, bangs a wall at that volume, 3 o'clock in the morning at 11-foot height? It just doesn't make any sense. And again, fast forward to my, subsequent reading. That's 2007. So fast forward to David in 2010, 11, reading about Bigfoot, getting really into the topic more than I ever had been before. And I'm starting to read over and over again of these incidents with people who live in these sort of places, and what are the Bigfoot, behaviors that are common. Well, finding a deer with a broken back leg, and its neck broken, common. Check. Finding that your house gets banged on, that something, walks by and bangs on the wall, check. Common. I'm starting to realize these are common things. And then by that point, 2010, 11, I'm reading, there's this thing, the Whitehall monster. And this Whitehall monster is very, very clearly a Bigfoot. And there's been numerous incidents with this thing. And this thing would be 40 minutes away from that house in the same county. Well, that's strange. So, all of this leads me over time to increasing interest and passion for the topic, and diving headfirst into the topic and reading everything I could soak up on it, and watching every show I can watch about it, and DVRing. The most common thing I'd sit and do in 2011, 12 with my DVR is sit and type in the word Bigfoot or Sasquatch in the search and just look for any show that mentions either of those words and tape it and watch it, And I just was sucking this stuff up like a sponge. And it's after that sequence, this, I know I covered many years here because I went back to the 70s and some of that rap, but it's after, that momentum building sequence of years that I find my way to the old podcast. I find my way to, wait a minute, this is a thing I could speak about with passion and depth and interest and enthusiasm that in and of itself is comedic, because it's just funny to hear someone speak with this much passion about this, who happens to be a comedian, who happens to have my ways of turning a phrase or whatever. So there's your long winding road to these podcasts.
We all have an interest, we all have an intrigue in regards to our own experiences that kind of lead us down this road. Did you feel much like I did when I started having my own experiences with your own radio background, that this was one of the only ways that you could figure out to get the answers that you felt necessary to what you had experienced?
You mean doing the podcast was one of the only ways?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? I don't know if I ever felt that. I mean, I might have been just as content to sit in my house and, watch every episode of Finding Bigfoot 26 times and, and take in all I could learn and not share with the world at large, anything I've learned or think about it. So I'm not sure it's so much that but the performer in me. I mean, you've done radio, and so you obviously have the performer gene, and I've done radio and stand up. And, is it Eddie Murphy who said this? A lot of comedians, I'm sure, have said this, that stand up is one of these really weird kind of jobs that you want to get out of the whole time. You kind of want to stop. You can't understand why you keep doing this, but you can't stop doing it. It's a weird compulsion, performing in general, and stand-up, comedy maybe specifically. And so I think that has more to do with what led me to the podcast. I think that the podcast is just that performer gene marrying together with this this knowledge I have.
Are you looking for answers, though? Or is it just the curiosity of the topic?
That's a good question. Yeah, sure, I'm looking for answers. I mean, both. I like talking about it. It's something I'm interested in talking about. If someone called me this afternoon and they wanted to discuss botany with me in my real life, I just got a phone call today from some friend of mine who wanted to discuss, their garden. It would just be very difficult to get me interested in it. I'm simply not, interested in gardening, and I'm probably not going to find a way to, engage my passion core about it, But I can do that with Bigfoot. I can do that with, other things I'm interested in, hockey or whatever, other things I want to talk about. I can talk about those things with passion and interest, and there's probably a handful of topics I could have done a podcast about. That I could have centered a podcast on outside of paranormal kind of things. Hockey would be a good example, actually.
Well, if you ever want to start a hockey one, you come join me. We can share some stories.
Yeah, I could probably have done a good niche hockey podcast and actually been funny and interesting with it in a way that, you wouldn't generally find in a hockey podcast. I mean, if I started doing that, it wouldn't surprise me if the NHL Network came calling and said, "Hey, you do this interestingly." That's a topic area for me. So, it's my interest in talking about these things is coming from my interest in these things, and whether an episode of Monstrosity, the guest is a Bigfoot guest, or the episode is a UFO guest, or Loch Ness Monster guest, or a Jersey Devil guest. All of those things are going to interest me greatly enough that I'm going to speak about them with tremendous enthusiasm and passion.
Is the paranormal funny, though? I mean, you're a comedian. You got friends who have interest in this as well. Is it funny? Because we don't hear a lot of jokes outside of anal probing. That's a great question that I would get a lot in TV meetings when I was, involved with the other show and it started becoming a TV thing. The answer is that no, it's not particularly funny in the pure sense, like straight out the way a lot of other topics lend themselves to stand-up or to comedy writing. And I think one of the beautiful things that I was able to do with the old podcast that I definitely think I'm doing with Monstrosity again is that I'm not out to make fun of the believer, which is what I think the audience assumed I was up to the first time. I remember when there started being some press about comedians talking about Bigfoot when it was brand new. And I remember seeing at the time on some of the popular paranormal and crypto websites, I started seeing like people reading the title of the show in like a little blurb about it and commenting, "Oh, great, just what we needed, like, some other idiot comedian that's here to make fun of us." And that was never what the mission was. And then I would read, a month later, the same guy would write, "Hey, I listened to this show. It's actually really good. They're not making fun of us. The host, is totally down with it and believes in it, and has had his own incidents, and he's got really good guests, and they're funny. These guys are really funny, and they say funny things because they just find funny things. But check this thing out. It's not what I thought it was going to be." And that was very that was a nice feeling to read those kind of comments, because the title was I guess maybe a decoy, and it kind of furthered the potential false assumption that what I'd be up to was here to make fun of you. Comedians talking about Bigfoot. I could see how anyone would have assumed, "Oh, what's this guy going to do to us?" But that's not the point of view I take. The point of view I take is I'm a believer, you're a believer, we're in the Believers Club, and I may have comedians in the room that obviously didn't have incidents and are more cynical about it, and maybe think that they're here to do more joking about it, but they quickly kind of get with the program. I don't warn them in advance so much about what to do or not do. I don't really give them a lot of rules, but they quickly kind of figure out that the show is reverential about the topic. And as a comedian, I can't help but spot the jokes. So if I'm talking to Bobo from Finding Bigfoot, or if I'm talking to Linda Moulton Howe or somebody, sure, they're experts on their topics, and they're going to, be reverential and serious about what they're saying. But I can't help it. I'm a comedian. I hear funny things. I see an opportunity to smack the ball on the tee, and I'm going to hit it. If I hear in my head the obvious sound effect joke, I'm going to hit the sound effect that I think makes this joke work. If I see a comedic game show that I can do, I was doing something. I did it on the old podcast, and I also did it on Monstrosity. I think episode 2 of Monstrosity, I did a game show I created called "Did a Bigfoot Do It?", where I throw at my in-studio guests a scenario. Hypothetically, has a Bigfoot ever been seen, stealing fruit from a farmer's market, and running off into the woods? And the clock is ticking. They think it through out loud. Could that happen? Where would that happen? I don't think so. And then I get their answers. Yes, you believe it could have happened? No, you don't? Okay, good. The answer is, and then I tell them if it's true or false. If it is true, I read them the news article that recounts what happened. That's comedic. That is comedic. But if you notice, it's not making fun of the audience. It's not saying to the Bigfoot believer, "You're an idiot. I'm here to mock you." It's just sort of playing
with, what knowledge my actress and comedian guest today maybe have on this topic. And, and then when we're done with all that, we go to the phones to talk to our ghost guy today. And when we talk to him, I'm serious, I'm scared, I'm reverential, I'm nervous. I don't particularly, ever want to meet the ghost that he's describing, is running around in that particular haunted building. I'd like not to be there, but I do want to hear the story. And, it's not, neither of my podcasts, not the new one, not the old one, are mock fests. They're not about mocking this audience. I'm one of you.
Yet this crowd, these experiences are extremely easy to mock for a lot of people.
Yeah, for a lot of people. I mean, it's not the mission statement of this show. I have a belief in all these things. I have some sightings and experience in several of the areas. There's the Bigfoot story I just told you. There's another one that I've never told publicly. And then there's a UFO incident that I had a few years ago in L.A., which I've learned through my years of reading now that L.A. seems to be a UFO hotbed, so I might have to move soon.
Not a fan of the UFOs?
I'm not a fan of anything scary. I'm a fan of those things in terms of, I'm a fan from a distance, but I am not interested in meeting any aliens, Bigfoots, Loch Ness Monsters.
Why not?
I remember when... I'm not. I'm just not. I mean, if you took me Bigfoot, looking for Bigfoot in the woods or something in BC, my first question to you would be: is there a Ritz-Carlton near that particular tree line? I'd let you go out and spend your night in the tent and run around the woods with your flashlight guys, but I'd be at the Hyatt, and you guys could tell me what you found.
So in other words, you just like reporting on it. You actually don't want to do the investigation because you're afraid something bad may happen.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by all of it. I want to hear every word of it. I love talking about it, love studying it, love watching it, all from a safe distance. My favorite place to look for Bigfoot from is my couch.
Well, you know what? Some of us actually like to have it actually happen.
Yeah, not me. That's not.
Have you been hearing too many bad jokes? I mean, this all comes down to the whole Communion Whitley Strieber anal probing thing. That's what it comes down to.
Nope, nothing to do with that. It's not. I don't even worry about anal probing. I mean, we all go through that once a year at our physical. It's not that. It's just. There's nothing unscary about this. I don't want to meet Greys. I mean, I'm glad that, the alien abduction stuff is happening to other people. I don't want to be involved.
Wait until you have a Grey show up at your window while you're broadcasting.
Yeah, that's terrifying. We've all seen those videos of, of a Grey, kind of face popping by the window in a particular, YouTube clip or something, and whether it's a obviously faked one or whether it's the real thing, either way, it still, will startle me. It's still like, just even if it's fake, even if I know it's fake, just imagining that, the concept of what that could have been if that were real, it's terrifying to me. I love these topics. I'm totally willing to be wrapped up in them for hours on end on my podcast or on my couch watching a show about them or in a book that I'm reading, but I definitely am not interested in meeting anything paranormal.
Wow. See, that's how the legend of Carl came around Spaced Out Radio. Is one night when I was doing the broadcast, he showed up at my window. Needing a name, so I named him Carl for some unknown reason. But
that would have ended my show instantly.
I'm not going to lie, it was a little eerie. It was a little eerie, I'm not going to lie.
That would have ended my show instantly. I mean, I like the show Ghost Adventures. I think that's probably the best of the ghost television shows. I don't know why. Just I particularly like that one. I think they get it right for me somehow. And there's someone listening to me right now thinking, that one's no good. You ought to watch blah blah blah. Maybe they're right. Maybe there's some other one that's better. I just particularly like that one. And at one point I was watching it like way more than I do now. Like now I watch, new episodes come on, I'll watch a new episode, but I don't go back and watch the reruns. So at one point when I first discovered the show 3-4 years ago, I was, diving into it, like, DVRing, like, all the old ones, like, trying to catch up on everything I ever missed on this show. And my wife said to me, if you watch this much ghost stuff, you're inviting this into your life. You're inviting, hauntings and spirits into your life. And, let me be very, very clear right now to any ghost listening. Do not come to my house. I'm not interested in any visits. I don't care if you're my relative. It's fine that I knew you then. Don't visit me. I'm not up for hauntings. I like the show. That's it.
Well, you know what? I do have to ask this because numerous people in the audience have already mentioned it. See, I have a fear of gnomes, garden gnomes. You know those ceramic, ugly little troll things.
Yes.
What's your opinion on gnomes?
The obviously the fake ones, the ones that we know we bought at Home Depot. Yeah, that does not bother me at all. That's okay.
Scare the hell out of me.
If you told me that you've had gnome sightings on your property of living things that are running around into the shrubs and stuff, that would I would never visit you ever.
Well, see, it wasn't me; it was my daughter. My daughter, a number of years ago,
she saw a living gnome.
She actually woke up a few nights with tapping on her window, and this is going back 10 years ago, and the one time she actually saw the pointy hat, the shadow of a pointy hat and a little short man running away from the window. That was enough for me. And my landlord at the time had garden gnomes in the garden. And it just scared the living daylights.
You just answered my question. You answered my second question. You said my landlord at the time, the key words being at the time. So I know you don't live there anymore. And that was going to be my recommend. My recommend was going to be move immediately. So you've already followed my advice.
Oh, some of the experiences aren't bad, though. I mean, who hasn't had a haunted house?
Fortunately for me, I don't think I have. And I'm really hoping to keep it that way.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? I think it's hilarious that, and almost comedic, pun intended, that here you are doing a show because you're so interested in these topics, and yet these topics scare the hell out of you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is a poor analogy, probably. I just, for some reason, I'm not immediately coming up with something that works, but... I'll change analogies. This one's a little better. Shark Week does really well on television. People want to see great whites, and they want to see, up close encounters of great whites. They want to see the guy in the cage, who's staring face to face with a great white. I would say there's a pretty good likelihood that the larger percentage of the audience watching that guy in the cage with the great white wouldn't want to be that guy in the cage, face to face with the great white.
No, not at all. I saw Jaws take down a boat and a helicopter, man. I'm not going there.
Right. So I'm in the group that's watching Shark Week going, this is really fascinating. I'd like to watch this. I'd like not to be there. That's me.
Yeah. See, Shark Week, I'll agree with you because you never know when Megalodon is going to come out of the depths and swallow that cage whole. And I don't know about you, Dave, but I'm a meal. I'm not an appetizer. Okay, like a lot of these scuba divers. They're appetizers. Right. I'm a meal. And I am not going to be shark food. As much as I am enthralled with the great white shark, I am not going to be shark food.
Yeah, I mean, so that's this actually is a really good example. I mean, Shark Week is something people watch on television. They do it every year, and they do it every year for a reason, because it probably does well in the ratings, and people want to watch it, and maybe you or I could even become interested in that. The crocodile hunter guy used to, run around grabbing crocodiles by the tail, and he was riveting to people, and he had great passion, enthusiasm, and he had a great ability to make you interested in anything he was doing on that show. I mean, I'm not a reptiles guy. I'm not really into snakes. I'm not into lizards and alligators and things like that. But that guy was so passionate and so shot out of a cannon that you would watch him do anything. I'd watch him chase a gecko around, and he just had such enthusiasm for it that it was contagious. Didn't mean I wanted to do it. I definitely didn't want to meet poisonous snakes, but I enjoyed watching him meet them.
Yeah. Snakes are another one on that hit list. Just get rid of them.
Right.
And big spiders. I know my news guy, Everett, he was having one hell of a time with his woodpile in Illinois today because there was giant spiders crawling around his woodpile, and there was a big snake in there. And I said, well, you just got to get a stick of dynamite and blow that thing up now. It's just absolutely no good. You can't use that wood.
So I think that is sort of the way to figure me out on these topics. I think that, you'll watch a show probably tomorrow night on National Geographic about snakes and be riveted. You might watch the whole hour. It might be a really interesting show to you, this show about cobras. Doesn't mean you want to go looking for cobras and learning how to catch one and grab one. That's sort of how I feel about looking for Bigfoot.
See, I've had a Bigfoot experience. I was within 100 feet of two of them back in 2013, 5 years ago now. Wow, that sucks. And it is absolutely riveting. There's nothing more that I want than to see this creature again, because I think it is a creature that I don't think it is a violent creature that's going to rip your head off just because you're in its territory. Well,
I mean, the evidence would indicate that you're probably correct, that there doesn't seem to be a lot of Bigfoot violence in folklore or factual stories. But then you got to look at something like Missing 411, and you have to be a little bit wondering what exactly is behind all the missing 411 cases, and they seem to overlap an awful lot with areas that would potentially or likely have Bigfoot activity. So you have to be a little bit wondering who's making the missing go 411.
That is true. That is totally true, and I think there could be something to that, and David Paulides is doing some fantastic work with that. I mean, let's be honest here. He is doing some fantastic work,
Right, I mean, his work is enough to maybe make you think twice about wanting to be around two Bigfoots again. I don't know, for me it would do that. I don't know about you.
Well, I still go into the forest. I have a Bigfoot gifting site out here, as weird as that sounds. I want to see what it's all about. I want to see what's going on in the area.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago,
what's great about this topic and all these paranormal topics is that there are tons of people like you and David Paulides and virtually anybody else that we could think of, on television doing these sort of shows, that is perfectly willing to walk around Rendlesham Forest and, evaluate, what exactly happened there in 1980 and walk around the woods of BC, gifting Bigfoot apples and seeing if one takes it and seeing if you can get, closer contact and make a habituation site out of it. And there's plenty of people, you and others, willing to do all that for me. If all of you stopped, then there would be no one I can watch go take their lives in their hands for me. And then theoretically, I might be stuck having to do it myself, but then I can nearly guarantee you I'd find a different hobby.
Oh, it's not that bad. I mean, I know in my area, Dave, I'm more worried about the bears and the cougars and the moose with giant antlers and the wolf packs than I am about Bigfoot.
Yeah, my answer to that is move. And yes, of course. I mean, you live in an area that's really teeming with every problem. I mean, you've got four-legged problems, you've got grizzly bear problems, like you said, cougar problems, Bigfoot problems. I mean, it's a terrible neighborhood.
Oh, man. I mean, just because I have to watch every time I go out the door, I mean, that's not a bad thing. It's a lot easier than getting mugged just for going to get, a coffee.
Yeah, in L.A., I mean, there are mountain lions. You see it on the news here. There are mountain lions. But generally speaking, they're more or less in the mountains that surround L.A. If you're in, a more populous part of Los Angeles, chances are a mountain lion's not coming walking down your street. You'd have to be more in the woodsy there's not really woods here, but in the more mountainous parts of L.A. Or even I suppose the Hollywood Hills, you could, there are some mountain lions I've seen on 60 Minutes that are mountain lions living in the Hollywood Hills. So probably I wouldn't buy a house in the hills either. But in LA, the biggest concerns, for example, are fires. We all see on the news all the fires out here. And that's another thing that you kind of have to go looking for fire trouble. In LA, to have your house burned down, you have to have chosen to live somewhere where your house can burn down, like at the edge of the mountains and the forest, which I live in a flat portion of LA, so my house is not going to burn down. So I explain this to my father all the time, who, he'll see on the news like some giant fire going on in LA, and he'll be like, I know what you chose to move out there for, that stupid place with the fires. And I'm always like, there's nothing that's going to happen to me with fires. Like, yes, I see the fires in the distance. If I'm at the right sort of spot on my ride, I can see out into the distance, smoke or something from a fire that's maybe 20 miles away. Smoke inhalation definitely is a problem in LA. When there's big enough fires going on, you get ash on your car. You get ash on your car. Yeah, it's kind of like a little bit like living in a volcanic area. You get like an ash on the car, smoke in the air thing.
Up here too.
But David Race is not about to go on fire. My house is not in a position that it's going to burn. So, I'm feeling better about my odds right now than you with Bigfoot and the wolf
and forest fires
and the grizzly bear. Yeah, you've got nothing but problems there.
Well, it's not too bad here. It's not too bad, as we got about 5 minutes here before we got to go to our first break of the night, and we'll get more into Bigfoot, what you think Bigfoot is, in the next hour from the researchers that you've gone into on that topic. But, I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at, just listening to you, you're huddled into your home. How do you even drive in that traffic? How do you even, think about this stuff when you're rubbernecked in traffic for 16 hours a day?
Well, mostly I don't leave my house. Really, I minimize leaving my house. I mean, working in the business, I don't have some day job I have to go to, the office or something. I don't have, there's no place I have to go each day. So my first stop every day is, downstairs in my living room, watching television. And then eventually I find my way to my home office upstairs, and I sit down at my desk and I, do whatever things I want to do from a work standpoint today, planning the podcast or, anything else in the world of TV and comedy and things that I need to work on. And, I don't have any excessive drives. I've managed to make LA manageable in terms of, I'm not some guy that's stuck in some crazy commutes or something.
Well, how close are you to your closest psychic? Because I know there's going to be a psychic around the corner.
There's a psychic I was going to have on the podcast, actually. I think it was this episode, maybe it was the next episode. One of the next couple episodes, I had booked a psychic who lives very near me. And I ended up changing the thrust of the episode, and we may have her on at some other point if I kind of go back to doing the episode I was going to do with that, or just some other concept altogether. I could see me involving this woman. She does live near me. I've never met her before, but just happens to live near me. When my sister and I were looking for somebody to do the show in that role, we wanted someone who lives very near the studio, which happens to be also near my house, so that they couldn't flake on us. I didn't want some psychic telling me, I got a pile of psychic work today, and got backed up in my psychic stuff and couldn't get there. I wanted someone that was so close by that they would psychic their way right over. And this woman is nearby, so she could end up on the show. But about the traffic thing, that's a great example. The podcast, the studio where I do the podcast, is less than 10 minutes from my house. By LA standards, I can tell you that's like incredible. That's like walk out your front door to the guy across the street.
If you want a good psychic with a good story in LA, Sloan Bella or Patty Negri. Two are very good. Two are very good. Hey, I'm curious. What do you think? We got about 2 minutes here. What do you think about all these psychics recently getting busted for fraudulently taking money from people?
Just reading about that yesterday, and I kind of read the headline, something about pillowcases and putting money in pillowcases, but I didn't get into the articles. I don't know a ton about the details on that.
But do you think there's a little bit too much of that going on? And, think about it. I mean, people are playing with people's emotions.
Well, if you're asking if I think there's too much going on in terms of psychics scamming people, yeah, that's probably an obvious trap someone could fall into. I mean, often people who are sitting in front of a psychic could be in some desperate situation, desperately wanting some kind of good news about something or another, and they're in a position that they could potentially be vulnerable to some kind of fraud. So it seems like a business that would need to be policed in some way.
Yeah, I wish there was a way. Maybe I need to read into that a little bit more.
Yes.
You know, but nonetheless, we're going to get into Bigfoot with you. We got about 30 seconds here before we have to go to our first break of the night. David Race is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. DavidRace.com is his website, as well as his other website. If you want to check out his podcast, it's MonstrosityPodcast.com, where he gathers around a bunch of comedians, and they talk about the weird and strange, like Bigfoot, and so on and so forth. Very interesting topics. We're going to get more into Bigfoot here in hour number 2. I want to find out what David thinks this big hairy beast is. He's talked to a lot of people about it, so we got to find out about it. I have my opinion. What's David's? That's what we're going to get to next on Spaced Out Radio in hour number 2 of the show. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with more right after this.
Find your escape where time has no limits. It's about living today and cherishing the heritage of yesterday. A spirit of adventure for what is new, with the nostalgia of the past. Your timepiece is a reflection of who you are. Life surrounded by beauty from the world around us to the soul within. EscapeWatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
The freedom to post what you want, when you want. That's the social media freedom you need. Social Media Freedom is the free app in your app store. No need to worry about going to jail or being shadow banned any longer. It's the freedom to say what you feel. The freedom to know Big Brother isn't watching. It's the way social media is supposed to be. Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free. Download from your app store today.
Coming September 28th to the 30th, it's our first annual Caribou Paracon, put on by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. 3 days of paranormal, supernatural, and spiritual knowledge in the beautiful 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Tickets are $150 Canadian for the event, being held at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Come watch our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Lorian Fenton, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, and more. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4 Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
Hi there, this is Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm going to take you for a ride every Sunday night on Spaced Out Sundays. I'm going to set up your week with some strange tales from across North America, from psychic readings, Sasquatch, UFOs, to the most haunted locations. Come join me at spacedoutradio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, and let's get weird together. I'd love for you to join me. Spaced Out Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
There's news, and there's The Encounter. This is Spaced Out Radio News Director Everett Thiemer inviting you to check out The Encounter. Our half-hour news segment every Monday through Friday night is different compared to what you're used to. Our goal is to bring you the weird, strange, and interesting stories the mainstream tends to leave out, and stories that will make you scratch your head in disbelief. The Encounter can also be found at spacedoutradio.com and on our Facebook page, SOR The Encounter. Come give us a read.
We're bringing scientific thought to the paranormal. Hi there, this is Spaced Out Radio scientist Chris Cogswell. Join me, Chris Zuger, and Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month, where we break down the who from the woo when it comes to everything paranormal. We'll investigate and try to bring sensible answers to those straight and sometimes outlandish questions people have. Hey, not everything has an answer, but we'll do our best. Listen in to Reality Paranormal only on Spaced Out Radio.
Heading to Vancouver and looking for some great nightlife? The Moose Vancouver is the place to be. Catch a game on one of the big screens or just come rock out to your favorite 80s and 90s hair bands. Great food starting at $6.95. The Moose Vancouver is open until 2 a.m. nightly. It's easy to find near the corner of Nelson and Granville. The Moose Vancouver is the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night on the show, John Tenney is back for his bi-monthly appearance, talking all things weird and haunted. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. Hi, everyone listening in on the SOR Radio Network and Deep Talk Radio. Good to have you with us. All of our archives are free on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Oniro Dania. Oniro Dania is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, the birthday boy today, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Don't forget, You have just a couple of days before the start of the first annual Caribou Paracon, presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. Go to questers.ca. That's questers.ca. Click on the fall conference. Get your tickets right now. We want to see you all up here. Tonight, we are talking with comedian David Reyes. He has a great little podcast called Monstrosity Podcast. Go to monstrositypodcast.com if you want to check it out. We're talking Bigfoot in this hour. David, welcome back.
Hey.
Good to have you here, man.
Yeah, good to be here.
So with your interest in Bigfoot, and we're going to focus quite a bit on Bigfoot here for the next little bit, what do you think this creature is? What do you know about it?
I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to risk pissing off a lot of the Bigfoot crowd when I say this, because the real Bigfoot purists hate this answer. And I'm still going to give it because I have to do the honest version of whatever I'm doing. I think it's, well, first, I'll preface this by saying I think no one knows the answer to that question, but I will say that the part that I'm referring to when I said that this could anger the purist crowd is that there's absolutely about as much evidence that a Bigfoot is not straight out of flesh and blood creature. There's about equal evidence that a Bigfoot is an alien entity. So I don't, I know the Bigfoot purists go crazy when you even, commingle alien and Bigfoot, and I'm commingling away here because there's just too many sightings that involve Bigfoots coming and going from UFO sightings all around a Bigfoot hotspot or incident. There's the Blue Planet Project documents that leaked out online years ago that the U.S. government is naming in that document various alien species that are known to visit the planet, and they talk about wadigs, W-A-D-I-G, and there's a picture, an artist rendering of what a wadig is, and it's clearly a Bigfoot. And if you look at the description in the Blue Planet Project leaked documents, if you look at the description there, the description clearly says that wadigs, which are an alien species known to the U.S. government to be visiting the planet, are commonly referred to, by humans as Bigfoots or Sasquatches, but they're known to the U.S. government to be an alien species called a wadig. And you also have Bigfoot incidents that involve a Bigfoot vanishing before people's eyes, in a blink, flashing out. There's a lot of telepathic communication in Bigfoot incidents, a lot of incidents that involve, a person who lifting a camera about to take a photo or lifting a rifle to their shoulder about to shoot when they hear a voice in their heads seeming to be coming from the Bigfoot, telling them, put that down right now or I'm going to kill you, things to that effect. Put that down or, immediately or you're going to get hurt. Messages like that coming through in people's brains from a Bigfoot they're staring at all seem an awful lot more alien to me than flesh and blood. So the answer is no one knows the answer. That's the first thing I would say to any purist who wants to argue with me right now is you don't know the answer. You can argue with me all day. You don't know the answer. You think you know the answer, but you don't know. Capital N. Sorry, there you go. No, not capital N. Capital K. You don't
there you go.
know. You don't.
I almost
know
had to red pen you there. You realize that?
Yeah. I can't believe I undermined all the credibility I was building up. I had a whole head of steam going, and then actually said capital N because you automatically, when you say the word no, you say capital N. But yeah, the answer is the purist doesn't know. He thinks he knows. The guy who's convinced that it's an alien is also not correct. He doesn't know. So the answer is it's unclear, but there's evidence pointing in both of those directions, and it really could be either. There you go. There's your long and short answer at the same time.
How would you feel if I said I almost agree with you?
I feel that you're a risk taker and that you should move.
I'm not moving. I am not moving. Now, I'll tell you right now, if all of a sudden there's like garden gnomes, like real ones that start appearing at my window, I'm going to think about it. And I'll probably have to burn my house down and my entire property just to cleanse it. But nonetheless, I'm not moving. But I'll tell you where I agree with you. I'm not sure about the alien side of things, but I do believe that there is something very special about this creature, and I use the term special very loosely. My own personal experience, right after I had seen the two Bigfoot, a few days later, I thought we were being followed. This is at my friend's property in the middle of Mission, British Columbia, where they lived on top of a mountain, and there was a forest in behind their house. And they had this old cherry tree, and I turned and looked at this cherry tree, and there was like, you know when you pixelate someone's face on camera? Right? Mm-hmm. There was this pixelation from the ground to about 10 feet up on the left side of this cherry tree. And another one of my friends saw it. The other two who were with us did not see it. And so they're like, come on, let's just continue walking to the front of the house here. So we continue walking to the front of the house. We get to the front of the house, and that's where we heard the roar from behind us. And, you know, you add in evidence where, you know, there's been photographic and video evidence of footprints that just seem to stop in the snow from the Yeti, and there's no trees around. That's where I believe a lot of the First Nations, American Indians, legends on this, that this creature is either a shapeshifter or some sort of interdimensional species. Alien? I'm not too sure about that, but I do believe there is something very, very unique about it.
Well, the first thing I would say about that is your friend should move.
Oh, they moved. They moved.
I'm just trying to work in as many should move jokes as possible. That's the whole recurring comedic
I'm
theme
noticing
at this point. Yeah. See, in comedy on stage, when you're doing stand-up, that's called a callback. You know, when you're making reference to something you said earlier or something someone else said earlier in a way that's going to catch the audience off guard or in a way that's going to hit them as especially funny that you're, again, referencing that thing from earlier unexpectedly in a weird twist. And I've done that constantly throughout this. I mean, I've beaten the callback concept to death throughout this whole program.
Well, I can honestly tell you I'm not moving. And I do know that they moved. So, that's pretty much fine. But, I mean, with Bigfoot and everything, you know, one of the issues that I have with a lot of the Bigfoot researchers out there, and for the majority of them, they are very good people. However, I think where they fall back on their heels a little bit with their research is we seem to have a lot of opinion being used as scientific evidence. What's your opinion on that?
My opinion on opinion being used as scientific evidence? Sure. I mean in this particular arena, the paranormal arena, that's just par for the course. I mean, all of the things that we could potentially be talking about tonight, and that these kind of shows talk about, and these people interested in these topics are thinking about and reading about, are just at their nature, they're things of the unknown. That's half of these shows have the word unknown or the word mystery in their titles. I mean, they're all unknown things, and so you're open to people putting their own spin on it, putting their own pseudoscience on it. I mean, it's not. We're not talking about absolutely able to be calculated math. We're talking about unknown topics in each one of these things.
So when you look at the Patterson-Gimlin film, which has been broken down left, right, and center, frame by frame, much like the Zapruder film of JFK being assassinated, do you think we're looking at a real Bigfoot,
Absolutely.
Or do you think?
Yes.
Okay, why are you convinced of that?
No, I think the Patterson-Gimlin film is the real thing. I have studied the hell out of that. I've read books about it. I've watched every documentary examination of it. I've watched the zooming in with Bill Munns, examining frame by frame the restored original copy and looking at the muscle movement in each muscle and the anthropologist's commentary. And I think that's a real thing. I even went back and, in fact, I kind of feel like it was one of the first 10 or so Bigfoot books I read was the original Roger Patterson stuff, the actual stuff he wrote. And I remember loving that, reading Roger Patterson's actual kind of pamphlet-y books that he had put out in the 60s. So yeah, no, I think the Patterson-Gimlin thing is the real thing. I think that's it's one of the most interesting things in the world, actually. That I do think it's the real thing, and it's just widely thought of by the populace at large, who aren't, interested in these topics. These topics intensive crowd that's listening to us tonight. Obviously may be with us, may agree with us that that's real, but the populace at large, shrugs that film off as some guy in a suit, or that, I've seen that thing, that famous, where the Bigfoot looks at you, turns around and looks at you. The average person has seen that thing. That's the the most widely sort of traveled image of a Bigfoot, and that's why you see bumper stickers with that particular pose. I mean, that's the Bigfoot in the average North American's mind. And I don't think any more than maybe 20% of the millions and millions and millions and millions of people all over this continent that have seen that film, all over the world that have seen that film, I don't think more than 20% of them understand they're looking at the real thing.
The boobs convinced me.
One of many convincing things.
You were not going to sew a pair of breasts on a costume just for a joke on a fake film.
Right. Well, it would show an incredible amount of depth of thinking to the whole charade. Like it's such an incredible thing to have decided to take that, to put that decoy in there.
I agree, and yet people say, "Oh, it's just the bodysuit collecting in the chest area because it's too big for the person."
It's not. That's the real thing. I mean, the average person doesn't understand that famous tape that they've all seen on the intro of different TV shows, or the 5 minutes they once paid attention to a Unsolved Mysteries episode about Bigfoot or something. The average person around the world, and particularly in the United States, doesn't understand that was the real thing. It's kind of like people always wonder, how would the populace at large react if they knew and understood that aliens are real, and that aliens are really visiting the planet, and that we really don't have control of our skies, that there are alien species that can come in tomorrow and just take us out if they chose to. And you hear discussion about that the world governments, the U.S. government and other governments of the world, have to keep this sort of stuff under wraps, because it would cause panic in the streets. People would be running around with their hands over their heads screaming, "What do you mean, protect me? This is insane. What about religion?" It would just sort of undermine everything that's pegging people in place and keeping people marching to their chain, to suddenly know that things aren't as they think they are. I think that the Bigfoot image in the Patterson-Gimlin film is similar, in terms of the average person doesn't understand that they're looking at the real thing. If they understood they were looking at the real thing, how much might that untether them from the reality they think they live in?
And that's the big thing. I mean, around here, I know one of the big secrets with Bigfoot is kept by the logging companies. And the reason why is logging in my area is a huge commodity and a huge resource and financial boom for the community. That's where the majority of people in my town work, out in the forests. And some of the sightings that have happened there with boulders being thrown at logging equipment and footprints all around, and these wood structures that the surveyors have found and have been chased out. All of those employees are told to keep absolutely silent. And the reason why they're told to keep silent is because if by chance it is reported and the government comes in and says, we need to research this area, and closes off a forest area to logging, well, that's going to cost a lot of money to the companies. a lot of money, and they're not willing to take that chance. And it's kind of weird that this mythical creature is, being kept quiet because, once you come up with a new creature, you have to find out habitat, their food sources, water sources, and you got to protect that area. And that's the fear of the logging companies. If Bigfoot is proven real to the many who have experienced something strange in the woods while logging, then that is their worry. And their areas of logging may be shut down.
Yeah, the first thing I would say to that is you've got to move. I can't stop doing this joke. You'll never... This joke's going on to the end, I'm telling you now.
All right.
The second thing I would say to that is, yes, that's a great example of, the kind of, price to pay, the kind of things that, the people who are trying to keep order are trying to keep order about. Great example.
But it just goes to show that in logging areas like Northern California, Oregon, Washington State, British Columbia, and, once you head east, there's other companies and states and provinces that allow it as well. You got to wonder if there's some kind of logging collusion going on there to keep silent on this creature.
Yeah, that goes back to the California stories also. I think that the original California stories in Northern California, like you talked about, were involving loggers, and I think there was some fakery going on. Some of the loggers that were involved with faking certain things, but there was a kind of a mix of fake and real, sort of like the UFO thing has a mix of fake and real things, which is also designed, I think, to muddy up the picture and kind of keep. If you can put out a certain percentage of fakery and good fakery, but fakery, like, for example, the Roswell autopsy video that was released 10, 15 years ago, which was probably fake, but was really well done. You got to wonder who was behind that exactly. And it's all designed to sort of cause the average person to come to the conclusion, yeah, it's all fake. Wasn't that proven fake? Or, so that they kind of don't stop and take a harder look at any of it and realize how much of it is real. When Patterson-Gimlin comes up between me and anyone in conversation, on my podcast, not as much, because the podcast, I guess, if it comes up, it's probably because I'm talking to somebody who's a Bigfoot knowledgeable person. But in real life, I would say, when Patterson-Gimlin has come up in real life, when I've been backstage at a comedy club and a comedian who's familiar with the fact that I'm doing a podcast in these, in these topics, will say to me, "Do you believe in this kind of stuff? What about that, that film, the Patterson-Gimlin thing?" Or if they don't know the name of it, they'll say, that famous film with the Bigfoot walking and looking at you, And when I, come back at them with that's real. That's the real thing. You don't understand. You're looking at the real thing. Almost every time, the answer I get from the average comedian or person I'm talking to in that discussion is something along the lines of, "Well, wasn't that already proven fake? Didn't they already prove that was a guy from Planet of the Apes?" Or they'll usually throw in something that they think they heard, like, "Wasn't it the costume guy from Planet of the Apes?" Or "Wasn't that already proven fake on some show? They proved there was a guy in a suit." Or "Didn't some guy admit that he was the guy in the suit?" Like, they almost always say something back like that. You rarely are standing backstage with some comic who goes, yeah, no, that is real. I saw they proved that Bob Hieronymus is lying, actually, and that doesn't come up. No comedian's ever once said to me the name Bob Hieronymus.
I don't even know who the hell that is. Who's Bob Hieronymus?
Bob Hieronymus, I think, now I'm trying to half remember if I have this right, but I'm pretty sure Bob Hieronymus, your audience is looking this up frantically right now, or they know. Bob Hieronymus, I believe, is one of the people who claim to be the man in the suit.
Gotcha. Well, I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
I really am not. When it comes to Bigfoot, what do you think, would have to be done to prove this creature's existence?
I hate to say this, probably a body. I mean, I'm not advocating for that. That is not, let me be very clear with the audience, that is not me saying, so I would like someone to take one in, kill it. I'm not in favor of, there's some shows I've seen on TV that are like about killing Bigfoot. That's what the theme of the show is. Like that's not what I'm advocating. I'm answering what I think it might take to end the discussion, to end the debate, hardcore end it. It's not about that I'm saying that's what should be done. I'm just saying that I do think that would end it.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't have to come back to that too. But I mean, there is a plethora of evidence. And by the way, plethora is the drinking word for the audience. So if you could throw that in there, we'll really appreciate that. But
you guys have a nightly drinking word on the show?
Oh, it's always plethora.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the password, we still haven't figured out what it's for. So we just say exactly when people ask what's it for. So we have a little bit of humor around here, too. We know how to have fun. Yeah. Us Canadians know how to have fun outside of our igloos.
Yep. No, I'm a big fan of the Canadians.
I'm not a Montreal Canadiens fan, though.
No, not a big fan of them, but you Canadians in general.
Exactly. But nonetheless, I really do believe that between the amount of footprints, the hair samples that have been found, the ones, and I'm not saying the ones that are tested that came back as a bear or a raccoon or a wolf or anything like that, but the unknown species hair that has been tested, and I know Mr. A-hole Skeptic on Twitter is going to love this when I say the word scat, because for some reason he has a big eye roll on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio when I use the word scat and Bigfoot in the same sentence. But nonetheless, I think there is enough tangible evidence to say we have something out there. Can we prove it's Bigfoot? No, not necessarily, but we have something out there walking around the forest that we do not know about. And that should be enough to try and get some serious studies on this rather than needing a body. Because, you ask anybody who's spent a good amount of time in the wilderness, it's rare they come across a carcass. Very, very rare. They may come across skeletal bones, but if Sasquatch is somewhat human, if we can use that term, the chances of finding a skeleton are slim to none.
Right, and now let's leap into the earlier part of this conversation. If Sasquatch are potentially alien, then you're really talking about not having this go as easily as you or anyone else might imagine it could potentially go to bring in or prove a flesh and blood terrestrial creature. If there's an extraterrestrial component to this, which I think is completely possible, and probably as much as 50% the possibility here, then this is not nearly as easily provable as anyone would think. So you're talking about a creature that may have much more ability to vanish, escape, leave the scene, blink out than would ever even make it conceivable that you'll prove this in the ways we're discussing.
So what do you think then of Todd Standing and all these lawsuits that he's been filing in California, Alberta? He just got one tossed out of court here in British Columbia, trying to get a protection act against for Sasquatch and against the public. What do you think about that?
I am familiar with the suits. I haven't read the details of what exactly he's talking about and what his contention is in the suits, but I did watch with great interest the kind of initial introduction of Todd Standing as a Bigfoot witness expert, on Les Stroud's Survivor Man Bigfoot stuff a few years ago, when he first sort of brought Todd Standing into tremendous international fame. And I watched all that stuff really closely, and I watched, the original episodes at the time with the incredible footage that Standing was putting out. I found him credible at that time, and I found that footage amazing, and was thinking this is an unbelievable, bunch of tape this guy has. Like this is an incredible, credible guy. And then, over the last several years, there's been much more controversy around this guy, and I hate to say, for a guy who does a podcast like the one I do, you would think I'd be way more on top of this, but I'm not as on top of sort of what happened with Todd Standing and his credibility, and with Todd Standing. I'm not as aware of what exactly went all wrong in the Todd Standing story as I should be. I know that in the Bigfoot purist world, I don't think he's highly regarded. I don't think he's considered to be all that credible, and that the images and tape he put out in the past, I think is considered to be fake. When I watched it originally, when it first appeared on Les Stroud's television shows and stuff, I found it credible. But I've sort of lost sight of the Todd Standing story and what undermined his credibility, how he lost so much, again, standing.
Well, I think a big thing was there was some question that his sister or family member was a Hollywood makeup artist. And that's where they were questioning whether or not those faces of Sasquatch were actually real. That's where he started to get into hot water. And then if you watch his documentary with the late Dr. John Bindernagel and Dr. Jeff Meldrum from the University of Idaho, it's almost like he's forcing his convictions of potential evidence on the scientists who are saying, well, we have something interesting here, but we really don't know. And I think a lot of people just get frustrated with it because he's so passionate about what he wants to do and what he wants to proclaim that he's making a fool out of himself. And that's kind of the opinion of why he is not very, very credible. Add to the fact that he could be faking evidence, which there is no 100% proof of out there, just opinion. And that's enough to ruin one's credibility right there, because once you get tagged in this field, there's no getting out of it.
I'm not going to say that in his case, he's not, correctly being attacked. Maybe he is. I am going to say this. The paranormal crowd has a habit of, it seems to me, of shooting the messenger right when the messenger comes along with the message they wanted to hear. If Standing's the real deal and that's the real thing, isn't it interesting that it's the paranormal Bigfoot community that knifed him and shot down what turned out to be a guy with the real tape and the real message? I mean, it seems weird, the eagerness with which this community will destroy the messenger who may have the message.
But that's true with the entire field. For instance, if you have a radio or television show that takes off, you sold out.
Right.
That's the attitude of the paranormal field. I don't agree with it. I think it's kind of hogwash. But if you all of a sudden decide that, hey, I have a blessed opportunity to make a living off of this, the rest of the community, whether it's out of jealousy or whatever it may be, jumps down your throat saying, he's a sellout, she's a sellout. Went for the money on TV. They don't do real research anymore. Look how fake this is.
Most rock bands suffer a similar fate with,
exactly.
Similar when they suddenly are successful. I mean, in some bands' cases, it's somewhat true. There are definitely plenty of bands that you and I would say were really good bands at an earlier point in their careers, and later on, when they were hit makers, they actually were a pretty trite band. But even that, the bands I'm thinking of right now that and I'm a former rock radio disc jockey, so this is really also my wheelhouse. But even the bands I'm thinking of right now that fit into that description, even when they became more poppy and started writing, radio-friendly singles or having a lot of radio hits, they still were crafting things at a higher level, at a different level than just some stupid bubblegum band that sort of was always bubblegum from the beginning. Like a band that was maybe depthier, that becomes a more trite pop group, or still oftentimes like at a different level of craftsmanship, even when doing the pop stuff. I mean, my favorite group in the world is Genesis, and they actually fit perfectly to the description I'm doing. I'm way off in a music tangent here, but they fit perfectly. I mean, Genesis is as art rock as you can be in the early 70s, and I loved them at that point. And then later in the 80s, they're as radio hit oriented as you can be. But even when they're a radio hit making group, they're craftsmen. They're at a different echelon, a different tier than pretty much every other band.
Well, Metallica suffered that fate as well. The minute they brought out the Black Album, people are, you sold out to the man. Because Bob Rock produced your album, and now it's going to be hits, and we don't want you to have hits.
I remember REM getting a rap like that, rap about them, about when REM became, much more hit singles oriented and not as much the indie band that they had been a little earlier. A lot of, tons of bands suffered this. But there are bands where it's a more deserved problem, more deserved tag that they get hit with. But, Genesis and Metallica are way off the chart from each other, so you might be much more in the heavy metal world of fandom than me, and certainly there's not a lot of overlap between Metallica fans and Genesis fans, but I can definitely appreciate your point, and I was disc jockey when Black came out, and I remember playing it and know exactly what period you're talking about, and I would argue that again, I'm going to go back to Paranormal in a second, so people please sit tight over there. I would argue that early 70s Genesis is super art rock, and then later on there's Abacab and there's the sort of hit pop FM radio friendly Genesis, and I still think they're craftsmen. I still this group is special the whole time.
Yeah, me too. In regards to Bigfoot, what is the best piece of evidence?
Also a big Genesis fan, Bigfoot.
Yeah. Well,
trying to make the transition work for it.
I heard they were more Guns N' Roses, but that's just me. That's just me. But when it comes to Bigfoot, what do you think outside of the Patterson-Gimlin film is the best piece of evidence out there? Because there is a lot of fakery and forgery going on right now and over the last few years regarding this.
Well, there's an incredible photo, and I was looking for it the other day online, and I could not find it. I'd seen it 3 or 4 years ago, and I used to know where to always find it right away. And when I went looking for it today, I could not find it. But there's an incredible photo some guy took in California that's unbelievably clear and close up of a very, I think, real Bigfoot that's with the conical head and the whole thing, and it's sort of standing in the backdrop pretty close to his camera, doesn't seem like more than 20 feet from his camera, when he's shooting at some sort of dead trees and things in the woods in California. And I wish I could find this thing online. I was just looking for it a couple of days ago, because that particular photo, I think, is money. I think that photo is about as good, if not better, than Standing's photo, and I haven't heard anyone question it the way they question Standing stuff. And I wish I could find this thing again. I don't remember what the heck I searched that caused me to find it at will in years past, but I feel like it's probably from only the last 5 years or so, and that particular photo to me is one that should be getting tremendous attention. It's sort of a profile shot of a Bigfoot with a conical head pretty close up in California.
I'd have to see that one. I don't recall seeing that.
Incredible clarity. If I recall, I'm not totally remembering, but if I recall the guy's story is that he didn't even really know it was in the picture until he was like going back through the pictures. It's one of those sort of incidents, but it's a fantastic clarity. I mean, admittedly, it almost looks like a gorilla. It almost looks like a silverback gorilla, but it's not. You can see that it's the face, the facial features in profile. You can see the lips and the face are different than a gorilla, and where it was shot, and the story the guy has, it's not a gorilla. It looks to me like this guy's got a really good Bigfoot photo.
Well, I'd like to see more of it. I just don't think that the public is actually buying it anymore because they've had the wool pulled over their eyes so much with fake CGI, with blurry, shaky films, with blurry photos. It's getting a little tedious and ridiculous for a lot of people, and they're not even paying attention to any type of evidence like that now.
Well, that's the whole muddying of the water stuff that we talked about. The combination of people faking things, actual real people, not government entities faking things like maybe the Roswell tape that came out years ago. That there's a chance the U.S. government themselves put that fakery out. But the sort of average garden variety fakery that goes on YouTube or wherever else, is everywhere, and it muddies the water and it undermines the real stuff and sort of causes the average person to check out. They go, yeah, whatever. It's all stupid. The average person sort of scoffs at all the paranormal stuff. It's all sort of laughable to them. Guys like you and me and the person listening right now we're much more serious about this stuff, and we study it more deeply, and we look at what looks real and what looks fake, and remove the fake stuff from our minds and stay focused on the real stuff. And we think we've seen enough real stuff to believe there is real stuff, and that's not the average person. That's not your cousin Kenny and my father and my neighbor next door. These are not people that that took the time to really dive into this and question their own thinking and realize, wait a minute, there's something to this.
Well, I'm hoping, very much hoping, that one day there is something like another Patterson-Gimlin film that can show some very, very cool evidence, because it's just sad with all the advancements in technology that the minute something does come out, that's a hoax. I can debunk that. That's a suit. That's a person, or you get somebody filming from a drone from 400 feet high, and you see this little brown speck walking upright through some grasslands into the forest, and they're like, that's a Bigfoot. Like, you couldn't have got your drone a little bit closer to it?
Right, the point of view of the average person is going to be about everything that you show them. That's a hoax. That's this. That's an outfit. That's a guy with a heat signature. That's just a deer. This is a cow. That the average person is going to dismiss all this stuff all the time, and that comes back to the stuff we talked about a little while ago. Not that either of us are advocating for someone to go shoot one. No, that's not what we're advocating. But you asked me what I think it's going to take to end the debate. I think that that may end up being what it takes, whether or not that's not at all what we're advocating. It's not what we're asking someone to go do. I'm saying that some idiot is going to do that, probably, and if he's successful, he may end the debate, even though you and I wouldn't have endorsed it. That's what he should have done.
So what's your thoughts then on this elusive creature called Dogman?
Well, I mean, all different regions of the United States and other parts of the world actually have these different creatures that all really seem to be different derivatives of Bigfoot-type creatures. Dogman, Lizardman, the Mogollon monster, and all these. They're all really kind of Bigfoot derivatives. Some of them are outright Bigfoots with different local names. Other ones seem to be just Bigfoot-ish creatures, in this case with a dog face and certain dog traits and behaviors that are either yet another alien species, or if Bigfoot is a flesh and blood thing, then we're talking about probably something that's derivative of Bigfoot that's just a slight genetic variation or change, just like there's sort of different types of bears and different types of monkeys and different types of birds.
No, and I understand that, and I think they are two separate creatures, but I mean, could you imagine, you got Jim Ross from the WWE Hall of Fame calling that match between Dogman and Bigfoot? That would be just fantastic.
Certainly pay-per-view worthy.
Oh, yeah. My money's still on Bigfoot.
Yeah, I wouldn't lay odds on that, but I will say, I will say this. I can't remember. It must have been on Twitter a year or so ago. I saw some debate where people were arguing about, can we stop with all the different names for Bigfoots? And particularly, I don't so much think the debate was about things like Dogman, but it was about the sort of localized regional names of things that are just essentially Bigfoot. For example, in Australia, the Yowie. Can't we just call all these things Bigfoot? And I'm for that. I would like the streamlining of the Bigfoot process. I'd like the simplification and paring down of the Bigfoot universe to, keeping it down to a minimum amount of names.
I agree too. I think it's, in the Canada and the United States alone, you have everybody has their versions of it. You have the Loop
right, the folk monster, and the swamp, the skunk ape, and the
booger, whatever, the swamp booger.
Right. It's a great example of a name that there's no reason for that name to exist.
How do you even come up with booger for that?
Right. What happens is it's regional. It comes out of the sort of the ways people speak in different parts of the country, and down south, that's sort of the way somebody started slang explaining what was going on. Back in 1899 when it was first spotted or something, the name stuck. But that's a great example. That last one's a great example of one that they absolutely let's start a petition to get that one switched into a Bigfoot.
Well, we'll soon see with that. But I still think Bigfoot wins in a match. I really do. You put Dogman and Bigfoot, let's make it even a cage match. Let's make it a table, ladders, and chairs cage match. I still think Bigfoot comes out on top. I really do.
I'd be more interested in Bigfoot football.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, 11 Bigfoots on each side, or a dozen, whatever it is, on a football field, would be a more interesting looking thing to me than a one-on-one celebrity death match between Bigfoot and Dogman.
Yeah, but Bigfoot taking a steel chair to the back of Dogman or to the head, and then kind of wrapping him up in a camel clutch, finishing him off by submission, a la the old Iron Sheik. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, who would referee such a thing? Right there, you have a problem.
Oh, I'm pretty sure Pete Rose would do it. He'll take any gig right now.
Yeah, Pete Rose is available.
He's always available.
Yeah.
And if it's WrestleMania, well, he's got to get, hit or something.
Yeah, all kidding aside, Pete Rose, maybe not, but who probably would take that? He is available. He's the same type, and I could totally see him, being excited to be a part of the Bigfoot Dogman match and on the pay-per-view extravaganza. Dennis Rodman.
That would be good, too. The Worm
Dennis
would definitely do it.
Dennis Rodman is just like a guy who's screaming to referee a Bigfoot wrestling match of some kind.
Oh, I think it would be fantastic. I really do. I think you could get good pay-per-view numbers on that. Bigger than some UFC events. That's for sure.
Yes, that the live mid-match beheading of the opponent probably would be an attention grabber.
Disgusting, but an attention grabber nonetheless.
Yes.
Go
on.
What do you think about all these cryptids that are out there, though? There are so many different cryptids that people say they are seeing from, never mind Bigfoot and Dogman, but we mentioned gnomes earlier, but...
You mean across the gamut, chupacabra, everything, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Everything we could think of. Yeah. Well, this is what Monstrosity Podcast is attempting to deal with also. I think that there's more than ample evidence for pretty much every one of these things. I think that there's loads of chupacabra evidence, there's loads of Ogopogo evidence, there's loads of Bigfoot evidence, and there's loads of alien evidence. And these are all, subjects that there's plenty of valid, totally credible evidence to look at and discuss, and people who are knowledgeable about it. And I think that it all seems real to me. One thing that is a little confusing on the chupacabra one specifically is that there appear to be sort of two different things that are being referred to in the world of science or paranormal studies or whatever you want to call it in this case as chupacabra. There's the thing that's more or less identified first in Puerto Rico with the bright red eyes and the spiky things on its head, and it's attacking chickens and stuff on farms in Puerto Rico, and with its bright red eyes vanishing back into the woods. It's almost like a Jersey Devil type of creature. That is the thing I think of as chupacabra. That's the sort of thing that I think is probably an alien creature, and that's the thing I think of as chupacabra. Then there's that thing that they've captured on pretty good film over the years, that weird mangy-looking, like hairless-looking dog that's kind of a little off, that they say is attacking chickens and animals on farms in places like Texas and sucking the blood out of them. And I think they've even gotten dead, shot and killed some of these versions of the chupacabra. And it's sort of like a dog with weird teeth that appears to have no hair and kind of a mange thing and a weird body. And that's sort of something else that is being referred to as chupacabra. When I think of chupacabra, I think of the red-eyed, glowing-eyed, black, spiky-headed Puerto Rican sightings that you read about. That these two things are being commingled and both being called chupacabra. I'm not sure how that happened.
Question coming from our audience member here. This is coming from Kevin, who is asking, do you think there is any evidence except for a complete body or living creature that will prove the existence of any of these creatures?
Good question. Well, it depends who you're trying to prove it to. Would it prove it to Kevin? Would it prove it to me or to Dave Scott? Yeah, I think that you, me, and Kevin might be more than convinced from a good piece of film, a good hair sample, a good still photo, a good video, good audio track. Those things are probably enough to convince us. When I'm talking about the likelihood that it's going to take a body in the case of the Bigfoot thing, I'm talking about the masses. I'm talking about 300 million Americans that aren't Kevin and aren't me and aren't you, that are harder to sell on this, that aren't studied on this. I think that getting them over the hurdle is potentially going to take a higher level of evidence than getting me or Kevin over the hurdle.
It'd be nice to get some sort of blood sample, one way or another.
A blood sample, a hair sample could be more than enough for me and Kevin and you. But
that is true.
It's just we're dealing with people that are much, much less invested in this, much less interested in it, much less studied on it, much more willing to dismiss it all as joke stuff and ridiculous and absurd. And those people are going to take a different degree of evidence. And that's most people, by the way.
Another question, as we got about 3.5 minutes here before we have to go to break. Adam is asking, we call him Ad Gnome around here because he likes to torture me with them bloody gnomes. He's asking, do you think Dogman is a Navajo skinwalker?
I could not even begin to tell you. I'm not that knowledgeable about Dogman specifically, and definitely not as knowledgeable as I should be about Navajo skinwalkers to answer that. So I would absolutely have to study both of those topics to a much greater degree to answer that in any sensible way. All I can say is that sounds possible to me, but I'm definitely not as well read on either one of those, Dogman or skinwalkers, to answer that properly.
Oh, not a problem. You will learn. You will learn as you get deeper into the rabbit hole.
Yes.
Do you think then that there is a conspiracy with Bigfoot? Hiding it from the public? The government knows all about it?
Conspiracy being orchestrated by the government? Well, that's what the Blue Planet Project book would certainly, or document file, whatever you want to call that release, that's certainly what it would imply. I mean, the Blue Planet Project documents as I talked about earlier in the show, do say that Bigfoots are Wadigs, W-A-D-I-G, and that it's an alien species that visits the planet, and that they're commonly thought of by the average person as Bigfoots or Sasquatch, but it's actually an alien species. That's what the Blue Planet Project document says. Now, if that's a real document, the authors of that document would be government entities, and that would make the whole, keeping down of this knowledge, yes, theoretically it would be a government project keeping it down. That's no different than they keep down, knowledge to the average person that the Greys are real, and that any other aliens and UFOs and other incidents like that are real things. All that stuff would be stuff that's in that Blue Planet Project document, and that would make it all stuff that the government wouldn't, be openly talking about.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes, because there are a lot of people out there who do believe that Sasquatch is being covered up. I mean, you go back to Mount St. Helens, where there are people who believe they witnessed these giant Chinook helicopters carrying out these giant Sasquatch from the area that were known to live around there.
Right, that's an area that's got loads of history. I mean, I believe it's right near Mount St. Helens that there was the famous incident in that cabin with Bigfoots that had surrounded the cabin and were, taunting and fighting with the people inside for many hours over one night. That's a famous Bigfoot story. I don't remember if the Albert Ostman Bigfoot abduction case was right at Mount...
here in British Columbia back in 1920s. Yeah.
Okay, so that's BC, not Mount St. Helens. But what the heck? You're all connected. I mean, BC, Mount St. Helens, not that far away. So, yes, Mount St. Helens is a Bigfoot hotbed area, and of course that it's totally possible that the government's so involved and so aware that the Chinook helicopter thing could have been what was actually witnessed. Sure.
David, I'm going to get you to hold on right there. We're going to go out to our final break of the night. David Race is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. He's a comedian from Hollywood who now is dabbling in the whole paranormal realm. His podcast, MonstrosityPodcast.com, is his website. You can check that on out. Getting a lot of good interest there from a lot of people, so I suggest you do. We got David for another half an hour here on Spaced Out Radio before we bring in Everett Thiemer and the Encounter News. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Are you tired of being blocked, shadow banned, or placed in jail for simply posting your thoughts on social media? Social Media Freedom can take care of that for you. Social Media Freedom is the newest and one of the best free new apps that allows you the freedom to post what you want, when you want. It takes seconds to download from your app store. Come join the tribe at Social Media Freedom. It's time to set yourself free.
The first annual Caribou Paracon is happening September 28th to 30th in the 108 Mile Ranch, British Columbia. Brought to you by the Canadian Society of Questers and Spaced Out Radio. Come listen to our featured speaker, Grant Cameron, along with Elizabeth Anglin, Paisley Town, Mike Moran, Eric Cooper, and more. It's a 3-day supernatural adventure at the Spruce Hills Resort and Spa. Tickets for the weekend are $150 Canadian. The Caribou Paracon, celebrating everything paranormal.
A timepiece is a reflection of who you are, and what better way to show off the real you than with an Escape watch? Escape is a lifestyle brand accessorizing your days and nights. Choose to escape and create the life of discovery that you deserve. Dream, play, unite with your own personalized Escape watch. Head to escapewatches.com. There is no time like the present to enjoy your escape. Use promo code SMF2017 for your 20% discount today.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
The Call of the Wild is in Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is one of the hottest bars and restaurants in the city. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose will rock you like a hurricane all night long. Great food with everything on the menu at $6.95 near the corner of Nelson and Granville. Get your horns up and come rock with us. The Moose Vancouver, the official rocking bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
You know, it's hard being the bad man of ufology, but that's just the way that I like it. This is Chris George Zuger, and I'll be hanging out with Dave Scott and SOR scientist Chris Cogswell for Reality Paranormal, the second Wednesday of every month. And our job is to break it down and come to conclusions as to what is really going on in the supernatural world. I'd love for you to join us and bring your questions for us to investigate right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
When it comes to the news, we look for the stories that the mainstream won't cover. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter. This is News Director Everett Thiemer. The Encounter is about the weird and strange stories that occur daily, and we scour the world looking to bring them to you. You can hear me with Dave Scott every Monday through Friday in our Encounter news segment. Read us online at spacedoutradio.com or check us out and give our Facebook page a like at SOR The Encounter. So come give The Encounter a read.
From the mile-high state of Colorado, sharing our signal around the world, I invite you to Spaced Out Sundays. Hi, I'm Tessa Nicole Thomas, and I'm closing out the week by taking you on a paranormal journey to the world of the weird. Ghosts, aliens, psychic phenomena, I will hit it all in your questions too. So let us highlight the paranormal for you. So come join me for Spaced Out Sundays starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for being with us. Tomorrow night on the program, John Tenney returns. The Paranormal Weirdo is back for his bi-monthly appearance. We get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern at spacedoutradio.com. Hi to everyone listening in on Deep Talk Radio and the SOR Radio Network. Don't forget, all of our archives are free on our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Oniro Dania. Oniro Dania is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. You can rock out to Bumblefoot, shop at our store, read up on the encounter online, and so much more. Coming up this weekend, we have the first annual Caribou Paracon presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. I highly suggest you come on up, get that passport. If you already have your passport, probably late to get a passport, but if you have an enhanced driver's license or a passport and you're in the U.S., come on up. It's going to be a fun weekend. Grant Cameron, David Weatherly, Ross Allison, so many great individuals speaking this weekend at the Spruce Hill Resort and Spa. I want to meet all of you, so come on up for a great weekend of paranormal fun. For the final time tonight, we introduce our guest, David Race. He's a comedian out of Hollywood, and he has a great little podcast called Monstrosity Podcast. It's monstrositypodcast.com if you want to check it on out on the website. Talking all things cryptid, weird, strange tonight with David. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yes, great to be here again.
I got to ask.
I should say, great to be here still.
Yeah, I do have to ask, because your main job in life is being a comedian. What do your other fellow comedians think of you talking Bigfoot, UFOs, aliens, ghosts?
I haven't gotten any overly strange reactions. Most comedians seem pretty warm to the idea of the show. They either kind of, smirk and giggle along at the idea of what I'm doing, or, mention that they'd be happy to do the show, or if we contact them to be on the show, we rarely get turned down. So it seems to be going over well with them. God only knows what they're saying behind my back, but in front of me, this seems to be going down well, as the other podcast did before it. And on this podcast, again, one of the differences between this one and the old podcast is that Monstrosity, we're not limiting ourselves to just Bigfoot, like the old podcast, and we're not limiting ourselves to just comedians as in-studio guests. The show tends towards comedic guests, so I would say that, generally speaking, there's me and two in-studio guests. It's pretty likely that at least one of those two is always going to be a comedian, or almost always going to be a comedian. Maybe rare occasion it won't be, but more than likely at least one of those two will be. But the two guests don't have to be comedians in studio. They could be actors, actresses, rock stars, models, or one of the two could be a known, actor, and the other person's a comedian. It's not. The show is not as locked in on comedians as the old show was. And the old show had comedians right in the title, so I kind of stuck myself in a hole on the old show right away by calling it Comedians Talking About Bigfoot. I was now stuck, always booking nothing but comedians. I had to live up to this title all the time. We better book comedians. This one, Monstrosity Podcast, we can broaden out our definition of celebrity.
No harassment? Nobody's saying, what the hell are you wasting your time on that crap for?
No, I don't get that at all. I don't think I've ever had anyone say that. Much more common is I'd like to do the show. If I mention to somebody I'd like you to be on the show, they almost always are interested in doing it. And if I don't mention them being on the show, if I'm just talking about the show in general, but not necessarily saying to that comedian, hey, do you want to be on the show? They almost always will pipe up with, I'd like to be on the show. So definitely warm reactions. But right now the potential seats for comedians on this show are less because I can go broader on the type of guest. So, you could have a comedian and an LA Dodger sitting there on the panel on this one.
Very few famous people come out about their experiences, whether it's hauntings or UFOs. Usually when you see the television shows that have somebody famous, quote unquote, on there, it's usually somebody looking for that second or third chance at fame by getting in front of the camera to tell some hokey story about something they experienced, in their LA mansion or so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that a lot of people in the entertainment industry today refuse to bring up these subjects in the public?
Because most of the public scoffs at these subjects and mocks these subjects. And, the Hollywood industry is no different. The average TV executive is going to have the same point of view as, the neighbor down the street from, any ordinary person, and that's going to be, a cynical, giggly, not informed amount of point of view on this whole, on all the cryptid and paranormal things. So it's not usually going to be an ideal situation from a celebrity standpoint to come out as a believer in Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or even ghosts, unless they're, willing to risk the mocking or whatever other, ridicule they think they might face. I think ghosts are a little easier. I think most celebrities would be more willing to acknowledge something in the haunting world, and I think that would hold true for people in general. I think ghosts are somehow more believable or more accepted by the masses. I think the average person feels like they think that could happen, or maybe it's because they want to believe that their relatives could still be around them, or that when they die they won't really be gone. Maybe that's in human nature. It's ingrained that they want to believe that their relatives are still there, or that they won't be gone when they die. So for whatever reason, one of those two or both reasons, people are warmer to believing in ghosts, and sort of, if I talk to a relative of mine that isn't at all down with this kind of stuff and doesn't believe in it, and definitely would have a mocking point of view about it, if you bring up ghosts to that person, that their reaction is usually more along the lines of, well, that I could see. I mean, I had something happening one time. I kind of was pretty sure that our uncle was was there one time. This weird thing happened, or they just want to believe that they've seen afterlife stories, and I guess they're hoping that they have an afterlife. So it seems that the average person is more open to ghost stuff than, you start talking about chupacabra, you start talking about ogopogo to the average person, forget about it. You're in a lane that the average person is not going to be comfortable acknowledging they believe could be real. And the same goes for TV executives. You sit in a room with TV executives that they're much more interested in discussing, doing another version of a karaoke show than the Chupacabra Comedy Hour.
I can see that. What about somebody like Tom DeLonge? What's your opinion of him?
Why am I drawing a blank on who Tom DeLonge is?
Blink 182.
Yeah, right. The rock star that went off in the direction. Yes. I knew that. I couldn't, for a second I had to skip there. I think that's an incredible story. This guy walked away from tremendous rock stardom to go running around in the world of aliens, and I think that's a really most people would say crazy, risky move. I mean, probably if I were him, I'd have sort of done both things at the same time. I probably wouldn't have announced I'm done with this very successful band, this 1 in a million, shot we've hit, because I'm looking for triangles in the sky. I mean, that's even way off the reservation from my thinking.
Getting back to the whole famous side of everybody here, there are some people who have come out and say that they have seen UFOs and seen things strange. Sammy Hagar is probably one of the more prominent ones. He's written songs.
You know what's really weird about this? What's really weird is, I swear, this is like a psychic connection we just had. As you were doing that setup, explaining, that there are celebrities who've come out and said they've seen things, and you literally could have said nearly anybody in the world. I mean, you could have said John Lennon had a UFO, and there's a ton of people you could have mentioned just now. For some reason, as much as 6, 7, 8 seconds before you said it, and you said nothing that telegraphed who you were going to say, but for as much as 6, 7, 8 seconds before you said it, in my brain, my mind actually said Sammy Hagar. And then you said Sammy Hagar, and you literally could have mentioned any of 200 people.
That is intriguing. That is totally intriguing. Total synchronicity.
And it's a little bit obscure too. It's not, Sammy Hagar's a big star, but it's not. I mean, John Lennon's the really obvious, super famous person that had UFO sighting. I mean, that was sort of like the most sort of obvious famous person you could have mentioned. And it's really weird to me that for about 6 seconds I'm going Sammy Hagar, and then you said Sammy Hagar.
Weird. Very weird. But I want to talk about him for a second here, because, I mean, here is a well-to-do rock star, got nothing to lose, still can pump it out at 70 years old, makes a good, tequila. And
yes.
And he comes out in Rolling Stone magazine a few years ago and says that I've been an ET contactee and abductee for over 30 years with beings from the 7th and 9th dimensions. Why do you think nobody jumped on that? I mean, this is Sammy Hagar sang lead vocals for one of the biggest rock bands of the 80s and 90s in Van Halen. Why do you think that nobody really jumped on that? Did they think, that's just Sammy being Sammy looking for attention?
When you say jumped on it, you mean jumped on it in terms of mocking him, or you mean jumped on it in terms of done something with it professionally?
Done something with it.
Like
you
raced
think more
to him with a TV show or something?
No, but you think that there would be other articles besides an article in the Rolling Stone magazine?
I think it's because these topics are scoffed at and not taken seriously. I think that Sammy Hagar, while everything you said about him is true, he's a great singer and fronted a really, significant band or two, before Van Halen, even those Montrose. And Sammy Hagar, it's possible that Sammy Hagar's made more money in tequila than he ever made in rock music, actually. So yeah, super successful guy and very famous guy. But, and I'm a fan of Sammy Hagar, but Sammy Hagar has a bit of a goofball personality. There's a hey dude, California goofy keg party guy in there that I think helps him not be taken as seriously as the messenger of that message than some other celebrity might have been. I'm not saying any celebrity would have gotten away with, gotten the attention that you're looking for them to get from that, but Sammy Hagar is particularly not a great choice in my mind of who they would potentially take seriously.
Mm-hmm. Joe has a couple of questions for you. He says, have you ever seen the documentary on Bigfoot that Bobcat Goldthwait did?
Believe it or not, I have not watched that. You would think I have. Bobcat Goldthwait is a comedian, and I obviously am well aware that he's very much interested in Bigfoot, and made that movie or two. I think he's done a couple projects, and I know that he's been on shows like this and everything else. So you would think that I'd be, well versed in the whole Bobcat Goldthwait Bigfoot projects thing, and I'm not. I've not watched those. I don't know why. I just haven't. I tend to in general not be, and I'm not even knowing for sure exactly what he did with it, but I tend to in general not be a fiction person in terms of, I get that it's a Bigfoot topic, but if he did what I think he did, didn't he do a scripted Bigfoot movie of some kind?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that would interest me to some degree. Like if it was on, I'd probably watch it, but in general, with this sort of stuff, and with pretty much all things, I'm not like a fiction-y guy. Like I'll watch the investigative shows on these topics, I'll lay on the beach and read a book on vacation, and the book I read, whether it's about Bigfoot or whether it's about a particular celebrity, I'm probably reading a memoir or a biography or a Bigfoot, serious Bigfoot book, investigative book. I never read fiction. It's all nonfiction. Anything I read is nonfiction of some kind. Things I watch are, the serious investigative show, the In Search of, Finding Bigfoot, years ago, Monster Quest. Those are the sort of things I'll gravitate to in this world.
Follow-up question from Joe. Have you ever had a personal paranormal experience?
Well, let's define paranormal. If we mean in the ghost realm, yeah. In the ghost realm, no. I don't. I guess the closest I've come is I talked about this on a different interview recently. It was the first time I ever talked about it, and so I'm wary to consider this a paranormal experience because it's not all the way convincing to me that it is. It's not quite like I saw an apparition, but I had an incident a couple years ago that maybe counts, and that would be that my grandmother was the closest person to me in the whole world. There was no one who was a bigger champion of me than my grandmother, and no one I had a closer relationship with through my whole life than my grandmother. And when she died in, 15, 16, several years ago, she was on the East Coast, and I live here in California. It was my brother that emailed me that my grandmother's dead, and it was very upsetting to me because she was very, very old, but she wasn't terminally ill or something. She was just, she died of basically old age. She was in her mid-90s. And when that happened, in the day that happened, my wife started noticing that there was a bird outside our house that was sort of following me around, that was flying right near my car and kind of looking at me through the window. That when I walked, from the garage back to my front door and maybe moved a garbage pail, this bird was sort of staying near me and watching over me and not doing the things a normal bird would do, which sort of fly away when a human goes within a few feet of it. And the next day, this same bird appeared to be around again, kind of hovering around, watching me a lot, and not seeming scared of me and flying away. Well, I can tell you that the reason this is significant is my grandmother, one thing that was a constant in her life that she had at all times in her house was a parakeet. She never, ever, ever did not have a parakeet. There was a parakeet loose in her house at all times. If you walked in her house, a parakeet would land on your head, and then it would fly back to its cage. It was just loose flying around. And she was, obsessively a parakeet owner. If that parakeet died after 5 or 10 years, she would immediately that day get another parakeet. She had a parakeet for the entire time I knew her. And then when she died, there was a bird following me around with unusual fearlessness for a day or two.
That's a little bit of an emotional story there.
Yeah.
Question from many in our audience tonight, because we have this big debate going on. Do you remember Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Very well.
Remember Devil's Tower?
Yes.
You think it's a stump, or do you think it's a rock formation?
I would bet rock formation. Not overly knowledgeable about what it is, so I haven't studied what it is. Never thought about to check what it actually is, but I would assume rock formation.
Oh, I understand that, but we're around here. We're Team Stump. Our news guy,
you could sell me on this. I don't know much about
look at it.
What the counter argument is. Yeah.
You just look at it. It looks like a giant tree stump. Like somebody took a giant chainsaw and cut it down. That simple. Nice and flat up top.
I certainly agree that's what it looks like. You're right about what it looks like. I've never looked into what evidence there is of one thing or the other.
Well, there we have it. Join us on Team Stump. It's much more fun over here.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. We got about 6 minutes left with you here. And, you also talk about UFOs and aliens in your podcast, Monstrosity Podcast. Is there a story out there that has really stuck with you that just kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies?
Yeah, in the UFO world, the Frederick Valentic abduction in Australia. Frederick Valentic, the Cessna pilot that vanished out of thin air in, I think, 78. Various witnesses seeing a shining object of some type that looks like it could have been a UFO incident right in and around and near where his plane was. Him reporting similar things into his radio before he vanished, and he's never been seen again. And that was one of the early stories that scared the wits out of me on In Search Of years ago when I was a kid, when I used to watch In Search Of after school. I remember the Frederick Valentic story was always really scary to me, and a great UFO, scary UFO, great meaning scary UFO abduction story. And who knows if, it's possible that with the Malaysia Airlines flight, a similar group of aliens have struck again, this time with an entire jet plane.
I'm not sure about that. I still think that plane's sitting at Diego Garcia, but that's just me.
Well, maybe it is, but there's a lot of possibilities with that plane. But the Frederick Valentic abduction appears to be a straight-out alien abduction of a Cessna plane in flight, and it's a great and scary UFO story, probably the one I find most interesting. And the Malaysia Airlines flight has disappeared wherever you think it's sitting, and it may be, and wherever other people think it might have gone. None of it. There's no evidence of any of it being accurate yet. So for the moment, that plane is gone, and it's as gone as Valentic's plane.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of strange disappearances when you include all the Foo Fighters and stories like that. There was a story out of Vietnam during the war there where a B-52 got shot down by a Foo Fighter. We saw them all, or pilots said they saw a bunch of them over Germany and the war zones in World War II. It is amazing how these UFOs really seem to handle conflict and really pay attention to it.
One of the, I feel like, less talked about things in the UFO paranormal, this whole universe of stuff that we tend to talk about on these shows, is the Philadelphia experiment. I think that's sort of like an unsung hero of the world of these topics. It's an amazing, fascinating story. It has unbelievable implications, the time travel implications and stuff. And there were lots of human beings who were alive in our lifetime, on the record saying they were involved and they actually were there and they actually came through a portal into this time and that time. And there's, television interviews with people who claim they were actually, on that ship in the 40s and involved. And here they were talking to you in 1989 on some TV show. And I just feel like that's one of those topics that sort of gets undercooked and underdone on these programs.
My friend, we only got about 2.5 minutes left with you tonight, and I want to say thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Really interesting to have you on the show, get to know you a little bit here, and welcome to the club when it comes to talking about everything weird, strange, and odd and unbelievable.
Well, glad to be around with it, and really enjoyed doing the show. It was a lot of fun, and we definitely covered a good broad range of things. Some things I don't know as much about as I would have wanted to, but we covered a lot.
Well, that's kind of the way it is. You're a newbie in this field. You're a newbie. You'll get it.
Yeah. Well, remember, hiding out in my house, there's only so much I can get. There's some degree of knowledge that the audience will always have beyond mine because I'm hiding.
Well, maybe it's time to move.
Yeah, there you go. You've done my joke on me.
Do me a favor. Tell everybody where they can find your podcast.
monstrositypodcast.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David Race, for coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks.
Coming up next on Spaced Out Radio, we have Everett Themer and the Encounters. We get to the weird, the strange, the WTF in the news of the day.
This is the winter of our lives. We come to play the final scene. The curtains closing in the darkness we expose what lies beneath.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio, where we bring in the Encounter, our news section on Spaced Out Radio at spacedoutradio.com. Click on the news section, and there you have it. This weird, the wacky, the strange stories of the day. And each and every night at this time, we bring in the president of Team Stump and our news director, Everett Themer, to come on in and share some news of the day. Everett, how you doing, my friend? Good to have you back on the show.
I'm doing great. That was fun. I was expecting a little bit more, maybe some Bigfoot walks into a bar kind of comments coming from a comedian, but that was really pretty interesting.
Well, apparently I have to move now. Too many things can kill you around here, so he says I got to move.
You can always move by me.
Too many spiders and snakes, my friend. Too many spiders and snakes.
You know, I'm a little disappointed that being a comedian, though, he didn't jump on the Team Stump bandwagon. I thought he'd jump on that. He could have a lot of fun with that.
Well, you know what? We'll see. Monstrositypodcast.com is his website, David Race. Thank him for coming back on the show to talk about it. So, I got a bunch of wood cut again today. Pretty happy about that. Feeling manly.
You saw what stopped my wood cutting.
I know. Snakes and spiders. Tell everybody about that.
I'd really rather not.
No. You brought it up. You have to. Be open.
I have a couple of rather large wood piles, and one of them seems to be infested with snakes. You go to move the wood, and there are some squirmy hose-like things in there, and you saw the one picture. It looks kind of like he's smiling, doesn't it?
That snake looks like he's like, come here, Everett. Come here, let me have a little taste of you.
And that other one, did you see the picture I sent you of the spider?
Yeah, that spider's massive. It's at least a foot long.
No, it's not a foot long, but
close enough.
The body of that thing would be about the size of a dime.
Either way, big enough.
It's going to be a cold winter here, because I'm not touching any of that wood until after it freezes.
You just have to burn it. Throw some gasoline around it and burn it, dude. That's all you can do.
I am not wasting that much wood. I will find somebody. I will pay somebody to come and stack and split that wood.
You have 4 years of wood piled up.
Yeah?
Burn it. Just burn it. There's snakes in there.
I'm going to flood that thing out.
Oh, come on.
I'll send them to you.
Oh, no. No, keep them away from me.
But he is a cute little snake.
No. There are no cute snakes, man. There are no cute snakes out there.
And I guess little is the wrong word, because it did look like that one. Now, there are several in there. That one looked like it was about 2 to 3 feet long.
Yeah, that's still enough to kill a man. I'm out.
Yeah, but you guys have what? Cougars and bears and things that can kill you just walking down the road.
I know. But at least, they're big, they're noticeable. They don't hide. They don't slither on the ground.
That is probably the worst part, though, is picking up a piece of wood and having something like that look at you like you've disturbed it.
I know. And then it just wants to attack and maul and put its fangs into you. Not me, man. Not me.
So after the Paracon, you're going to come down and help me split some wood, huh?
No. Get a wood splitter. Get a wood splitter. Joe in the chat room says, burn it. You got to burn it.
I am getting that a lot, and I just can't waste that much wood. That pile is about the size of a small truck. That's a lot of wood to go just getting rid of.
Well, your choice. You can sacrifice yourself to the gods and the serpents. Not me.
My son doesn't know the snakes are in there. Maybe I'll ask him to restack that wood somewhere.
Sacrificial lamb. Absolutely. Sacrificial lamb. There you go. Nothing.
Got to make them useful.
What's new in the world of the weird, the wacky, the strange in the encounter tonight, my friend?
Well, we've been focusing quite a bit lately on some of the more serious stories. And these are serious stories, but boy, they're open for laughter and jokes. And the first thing I have to say is we need to issue a public service announcement that a woman's nether region is not a storage place.
Right.
There are several stories out there, and two of them right now that are making the rounds are a little bit uncomfortable and drug related.
I don't know if I want to know this.
The first one comes out of Spain, where an unidentified British woman went to a medical center because she was experiencing abdominal pain. And when the doctors examined her, they found she had an infection that was caused by a dead turtle that was placed in her nether regions. They had a dead turtle, a dead Chinese pond turtle, the typical small little kind of turtle that you would get at a pet store or a place like that.
Right.
They haven't determined if it was put in there alive or dead, but the previous night she had been apparently partying with some friends and possibly took some drugs that clouded her memory and judgment.
Sure, they did. They did.
This
sounds like a dare.
It kind of does, but you have to have something clouding your judgment if you're doing that. But they aren't actually going to pursue the investigation too much because, strangely enough, she's not interested in following up on this. So that might give a little credence to your dare theory.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a dare, my friend. Sounds like a dare.
You never know when them young people are on vacation.
I know. A little bit of alcohol, a little bit of ecstasy. Next thing you know, you're placing turtles where turtles shouldn't go. Because that's always a smart thing to do.
And there is no way that ever could be a good idea.
No.
But you think that one's bad? There was a woman in Cornwall, England, who stored her drugs in there. And her and a friend went to another gentleman's house, and the three of them did drugs for a couple of days. At some point, she fell asleep, and the gentleman that lives in the house woke up and decided to retrieve the drugs from her body. Well, she woke up to him doing this, and her partner then proceeded to basically hold this gentleman hostage in his house and beat him so severely that he had broken ribs and contusions.
Terrible.
and hold him for approximately 36 hours. And then, after the beating, things settled down and they all went back to using the drugs.
Well, that's nice.
So, you read these things and you look at these things and you hear these things, and you just have to go WTF. I mean, how do you beat somebody like that and then essentially hold them hostage, and then when things cool down, you're all going to go back to having your own little private party?
Yet, I mean, I don't even know where to go with this one, Everett. I really don't know where to go with this one.
That's why I brought it. You have to look at this stuff and shake your head. It's a sad day.
How many people were involved in this?
There were 3 people, a couple, and this one gentleman who owned, it was actually his house that he owned, and they came to his house to, do the drugs, party, whatever, however you want to phrase it. And they stayed there and did not leave. And from what I read, they're basically, I wouldn't say transient, but they don't have a secure home of their own. So they were staying at this gentleman's house and just partying. I guess that's the best way to put it. When the homeowner continued to want to party and he had to get the drug somehow. And that's where the woman kept him.
Wow. That is one evil person to do that.
Which one? They're all kind of a little...
Well, I mean, just in general, man. It kind of reminds me of that story, where those teenagers kidnapped that handicapped person and literally tortured him for, what was it, a day or two? And they put it all over Facebook Live about how cool it was. That's what that reminds me of. It just makes me sick to my stomach, man.
Unfortunately, there have been several stories like that in the past couple of years.
I don't know what this mob mentality is thinking of. I really don't. How's the victim doing?
He's doing okay. Everybody's doing okay. The judge kind of came down on all of them.
Good.
In terms of, obviously this woman and her partner were charged with battery and sentenced, or they're facing sentencing. But he certainly came down on this gentleman, and he made some statements pointing out that this wasn't a sexual act. It was not a form of sexual assault. He kind of went on to go and say that this is what happens when people get caught up in the drug culture, that this form of depravity that they were all using, this one continued to want to use. That's where the woman put the drugs. So this is what happened. And he went on to talk about how this is a serious social situation, and this is what can happen when people get involved in that kind of culture.
Well, I mean, that's just a lame-ass excuse, if you ask me. These people, I mean, they tortured a person. Beating the hell out of somebody for a couple of days while you're riding a high, that's torture. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
It is. But, again, you can classify drug addiction as a disease, and what are the symptoms of that disease? Certainly, it doesn't exactly explain it, but depending on how you look at it, and I don't want to sound like I'm defending anybody in this situation, because everybody is guilty of something here. But if you're going to say that drug addiction is a disease, couldn't one of those symptoms be violent behavior or acting in an inappropriate way?
No. I think each case is different. You're taking the drugs. You're making the choice.
I'll give you that. I think this is a debate that will continue to go on. I mean, certainly, like I said, they are all guilty of different things. But still, nobody should be tortured or beaten for 36 hours and held hostage in their own home. But at the same time, he should maybe not have gone there to gone to her person to retrieve the drugs. And I think in this case, the judge is right to a certain extent, pointing out that this is the kind of behavior and actions and lifestyle that a drug addiction can lead to.
Let's move on to story number 3.
This one comes out of Florida.
Oh, yes.
And
this is what we're waiting for.
I think we have the reason why all the strange and stupid comes out of Florida.
All right, hit me up here.
A teacher.
It was always Arkansas.
No. Arkansas has its share of weirdos and problems, but Florida, well, I think this is going to explain a lot in the future. I think we've got a lot more coming up from Florida because a teacher was fired for refusing to give partial grades to students who turned in no homework or no assignments. Basically, this teacher, Diane Triato, worked at a school district that has a policy where the lowest grade a student can be given on an assignment, regardless of whether they turn it in or not, is a 50%. And she was aware of this, but she had several students that turned in no work, and she refused to give them 50% grades for turning in no work. So the school district fired her for not complying with their performance policy.
So this is about moving students forward, and she's saying if they're not ready, she's actually doing her job, and we're punishing this teacher for doing her job.
Absolutely. She was aware of the policy. Whether, you can say that she did not follow district policies, but in this case, I personally can totally understand not giving somebody a grade when they're not doing the work. I mean, it's almost a case of, and I hate to bring up the idea of millennials, but this is almost a case of where give me something even if I don't deserve it. And it's being sanctioned by a school district.
That is terrible. Like, what good is that? How does that help children? Seriously, how does that help children?
I don't think it does. I think in the long term, it obviously seriously hurts children, the educational system. And in a day and age when we're talking about the importance of what they call STEM, the sciences, math, that engineering, that kind of thing, if you're passing students and they're not learning the material or not even doing the material, how does that help them and ultimately help our education system and standing in the world when they can't qualify to enter a decent college? And what does that teach them? Using that argument, you could essentially turn in almost no work and then get decent grades on tests and things like that and still manage to pass the class.
It just seems ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I can understand that you want to keep them with their peers, okay? But if they are not at a level to keep with their peers, they got to pay the price.
But keeping somebody with their peers, there's a difference between an age group type of peer and somebody who is at the same mental growth or maturity level as you. And I think you can have two different types of peers. I mean, most people would say that my peers are, people like you, people like my wife, people in their 30s to 40s. But there's also a lot of people that would say that my peers are like 12 because I'm pretty immature at times. So what if you want to keep them with their peers, how are you going to balance that? What kind of peer? And I'm surprised.
Well, the way they look at it in school terms is that the child should grow up with the kids of their age. It's all about age. It's not about knowledge. So now what you're doing is, as school gets harder, You're putting more pressure on the child, who is going to fail more, get frustrated, probably end up quitting school.
Quite possibly. And you know what? Actually, with this kind of policy, I would think that your graduation rates would be higher because you don't really have to do the work. And in reality, what's a D- average? When I was in school, I want to say it was around like 65%. So if you do very little of the work and then you go through and do a few tests and come out with a 70, 75%, you're averaging there then at 60, 65%, and you're getting moved forward.
I don't like it.
Having learned nothing. The surprising thing is I don't understand how a policy like this could be approved by both a school district and why there's not some form of public outrage or wasn't when this was going through policy review by the parents.
Mm-hmm. Well, and not just that, though, but it takes the responsibility off the parents. That's the problem. That's the problem. Is school has become a daycare for 12 years.
But aren't you supposed to learn something? Aren't you supposed to gain something from daycare? Getting...
I know where you're going with that. Sorry to cut you off there. I know where you're going with that. But, I look at my kids. I watch what they do every day in school. Every day. I've been blessed. My two daughters were straight A students. And my little guy, well, he's just starting out. So, he's just worried about what color crayon not to stick up his nose right now.
I was worrying about that earlier.
So, Renee asks here, how are these kids going to function in an adult world when you have to work for your money? Oh, sorry, I didn't do my job. So should I get at least 50% pay? Good point.
Apparently, that's what they're being taught.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't there a university student, a millennial university student recently who actually sued her university because she didn't get a $100,000 a year job coming out of college? I think that did happen. I don't believe that's fake news either.
No, I vaguely remember that. And didn't that, I think that's sort of started sort of a debate about truth in lending and truth in career prospects for colleges to present to students, because a lot of these, at least here in the U.S., there are different accrediting bureaus, and some are accredited regionally and some are accredited nationally. And while they're all accredited, if you come from a nationally accredited school, that accreditation doesn't necessarily entitle you to work in certain positions, even though you may have the degree. There are some things that, like psychology and psychiatry, if you come from one of these schools like that are nationally accredited, you may not qualify to work in your home state. And there were instances where people were going to these schools, getting these degrees, and it was not a diploma mill. It was a legitimate school. But then after the fact, after paying for 4 years of college at $10,000 a semester or more, they were finding out that their degree was essentially worthless in their field of study because of the way it was accredited.
Yeah. I have a diploma. But I have a diploma in broadcast communications journalism from my school. And what they did was they took a 4-year program and condensed it to 2 years because it was a technical school and they weren't allowed at that point to give away bachelor's degrees. So they took a 4-year bachelor's program, condensed it to 2. Try explaining that one on the job market when people say you must have a bachelor's degree. Technically, you do. You did it in 2 years. But the piece of paper says diploma.
That's a tough thing with the educational system. And I'll admit I don't know exactly how it works out of the U.S. But here, there are so many different avenues and ways to get things. And even like I've mentioned before, the difference between national and regional accreditation, and then you look at some of the online schools, it's tough. You can have a legitimate degree from a school, and there will be people out there that, even though you did the work, will look at that degree as not a qualification.
And on that note, we're going to get to the thought of the day.
Excellent.
Pretty cute rebirth by the birthday boy, Ron Bumblefoot Thal. 49 years old today. Still rocking the way it's supposed to be done. Thought of the Dave happens every night at this time, where we ask a question during the day, and then we listen to your responses and read them off on the air on Twitter and Facebook. So today's Thought of the Dave question is as follows. What's the funniest paranormal experience you've had? Everett, we're going to start off with a real doozy here. Gentleman named Mike says, mine made it into the national papers. So I looked this story up, and by God, there it is. Him and his ghostbusting team were going through a cemetery where all of a sudden in their headphones they started picking up groans. Problem was, they were investigating at midnight, and there happened to be a midnight porno film shoot happening at that exact same time. Wow. Well, there's the thought of the day right there. Could you imagine walking into a cemetery and all of a sudden in your headphones, you got your microphone out, you're trying to collect some sort of sounds, and all of a sudden you're,
That is one lively cemetery.
Oh my goodness. You're thinking, wow, the EVPs are great here. I don't even know how to continue on after that one. I really don't. Goddess Michelle says, I had what I call a hobgoblin living out of one of my homes. I came to find out he really liked fruit cocktail. I would go down to my storage and cans of them would be ripped open. After a bit, I would buy him fruit cups that the tops just peeled off. Weird. Very weird. Daniel says, paranormal funnies have never been funny. Julianne, I was in Quebec, very close to a lake. Some mist came over in silence, and I saw something very close to me. I remember seeing a pirate ship, but now as I recall, those were black circling windows. Gee whiz. Gee whiz. WGAFA on Twitter. Walking past graveyards, scared something will jump out and bone me. I'm naughty, I know. That's probably a good place to leave it off. Wow. Intense tonight. Oh, yeah. Wow. I shouldn't read some of these cold.
No, you shouldn't.
No, that was probably a snafu.
And does Mike know the name of the movie that was being filmed? Just for research purposes.
Good night, Everett.
Good night.
Tell us where we can find the encounter.
You can find the encounter under the news tab at spacedoutradio.com, or find some of our stuff on Facebook at facebook.com/SOR the encounter online.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Big thanks to David Race for coming in the first 2 hours. Tomorrow night on the show, we have the legendary John Tenney coming back. The Paranormal Weirdo will be here at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. We got the birthday boy, Ron Bumblefoot Thal, rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Don't forget, tickets are on sale right now at questers.ca. You have until this weekend to get your tickets for the first annual Caribou Paracon, presented by Spaced Out Radio and the Canadian Society of Questers. It's going to be a fun weekend. Hope to see you all here. It's going to be fun. Come party with us. I want to say a big thank you to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Also, a big thank you to everybody on Rev Radio chat room. Spreaker's chat room, the SOR Space Travelers Club, the Veterans Club, and at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Skeptic, your snark was perfect tonight. Absolutely perfect. Thank you so much. We will talk to you very, very soon. We do it all again tomorrow night because together, my friends, we own the night. See you tomorrow night, everyone. I'll be here. Will you? Come join us. 21 hours from now. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Have a good one, everyone. Good night.